Hey everyone, welcome back. Quick thanks to the patrons who keep this channel alive. Your requests are what I narrate next. If you want to join them, you can try Patreon free for 7 days, then it's starting with just $3 a month. Links in the description. Now, let's get into the story.
After the Quidditch match, Eris grew more cautious still. That fleeting glance from Quirrell had put him on his guard. Whether the man had truly sensed something, or it had been mere chance, Eris couldn't be sure, but either way, it did no harm to take more care. He knew well enough how formidable the enemy hidden beneath that turban was, the least carelessness might cost him dearly. And so he had Iris keep an even closer watch on Quirrell, alert to his every move, and told the little dragon to take the greatest care not to be discovered. In the days that followed, Quirrell made no further move. On the surface he seemed the same timid, stammering professor as ever, teaching his classes as usual, betraying nothing amiss. But Eris knew that beneath that meek exterior hid a heart full of dark design. Then, one evening, Iris brought Eris a piece of news. Through the little dragon's eyes, Eris saw Quirrell slip into the forbidden forest under cover of night. Deep among the trees, the man's whole manner changed, the timid stammer gone, replaced by a cold, sinister air. He seemed to be searching for something. What's he after in the forbidden forest? Eris wondered, watching through Iris's eyes, a thoughtful light in his own. He recalled that in the original story, Quirrell had gone into the forest to hunt unicorns, to drink their blood, and so sustain the feeble remnant of Voldemort's life. Sure enough, before long, Quirrell came upon a unicorn. The creature was pure white, radiant and beautiful, an air of holiness about it. But Quirrell's eyes, fixed upon it, held only cold, naked greed. He crept toward the unicorn, drew his wand, and made to strike. But the unicorn was a creature of keen instinct, sensing the danger, it turned at once to flee. Quirrell gave chase, casting spell after spell, and at last brought the unicorn down. Then he bent over the fallen creature and, the sight was ghastly, began to drink its silver blood. Watching through Iris's eyes, Eris frowned. He knew the drinking of unicorn blood for a terrible crime. A unicorn was a pure and holy creature, and to slay one to drink its blood was a grave sin, one that would leave the drinker cursed with a half-life, a life but half alive. Yet Quirrell, or rather the master hidden within him, had done it all the same, plainly to sustain Voldemort's failing remnant. It seems Voldemort's remnant is weaker than I thought, Eris mused, if he must sustain himself on unicorn blood. That was good news, in its way, the weaker Voldemort's remnant, the less of a threat it posed for now. Just then, another figure appeared in the forest. It was Snape. He came upon Quirrell as the man crouched over the unicorn, and his face darkened at once. So it was you. Snape's voice was cold. I've suspected you a good while now. It seems I was right. Quirrell straightened slowly, the unicorn's silver blood still at the corner of his mouth, and looked at Snape, his manner eerie. Severus, what are you doing here? Even now he kept up his stammering pretense. Enough of the act. Snape's gaze was icy. I know what you're after. But I warn you, so long as I'm here, you'll never lay hands on it. At his words, something flickered in Quirrell's eyes, but he quickly masked it, and went on with his stammering charade. Severus, I don't know what you mean. I only came into the forest to gather some potions ingredients. Snape said nothing more. He only fixed Quirrell with a long, cold stare, then turned and left. But Eris could tell that Snape had, by now, all but seen through Quirrell, he simply lacked the proof to act. Watching the scene through Iris's eyes, Eris fell into thought. So Snape's already begun to suspect Quirrell. Just as in the story, he's been keeping watch on him, trying to stop him getting the Philosopher's Stone. Which meant that, at least for now, Snape stood, in effect, on the same side as Eris, both of them watching Quirrell, both wary of the enemy hidden beneath that turban. It seems things are still holding to the story's course, on the whole, Eris thought, a plan taking slow shape in his mind. He knew that in the end Quirrell would fail to get the stone, and Voldemort's remnant would be driven off by Harry. But he'd no intention of pinning everything on the plot running true. He would keep watching, quietly, through Iris's eyes, and the moment anything strayed from its course, he'd be ready to act. For now, though, all was still moving as the story had it. Eris need only bide his time, and go on growing stronger. While Eris kept his quiet watch on Quirrell through Iris's eyes, his own studies and research pressed on without pause. His research into the magic array, in particular, had reached a crucial stage. After a long stretch of study, he'd not only worked out the trick of guiding his magic to inscribe the array, he'd begun, at last, to grasp its deeper principles. And that meant the autocasting wand he'd envisioned for so long was drawing near to reality. One evening, in the room of requirement, Eris was hard at work on the spell-storing magic array. A special sheet of parchment lay spread across the workbench before him, an intricate array traced upon it, one that had cost him no end of time and effort. This was the fruit of his long research, a magic array that could, in truth, store a spell within it. Let's see whether it actually works. Eris drew a deep breath, then raised his wand and, following the method recorded in Merlin's notes, slowly guided a stored spell into the array. The spell he chose was a simple one, the Stunning Charm. He guided its magic, bit by bit, into the array on the parchment, watching intently to see whether the array would truly hold it. As his magic flowed in, the array on the parchment began, slowly, to glow, the arcane patterns across it lighting one after another, until the whole design shone with a soft radiance. Plainly, the Stunning Charm's magic was being stored within it. It's working, Eris thought, a light of delight kindling in his eyes. If the array could truly store the spell, then his autocasting wand was one great step nearer. Once the spell was stored, Eris tried, cautiously, to release it. He guided his magic to touch the array, and in the next instant, the stored Stunning Charm shot from the parchment, streaking across the room to strike the far wall with a muffled thud, leaving a clear scorch of magic upon it. It really worked. Eris could scarcely contain his delight. The array had not only stored the spell, it had released it intact, its power undiminished. Which meant his research had, at last, borne fruit. He tried it several more times, and each time the array performed just as he'd hoped, storing the spell, then loosing it whole at his command. Better still, he found the array could hold the spell for a good long while, ready to be released the instant it was needed. If I can inscribe this array onto a wand, Eris thought, his mind turning quickly, then I'll have my autocasting wand, one that can loose a stored spell in an instant, like a firearm. The thought sent a thrill of excitement through him. A wand like that would be a genuine trump card, one the present wizarding world simply couldn't match. But he soon calmed himself. Storing a single spell in an array was one thing, inscribing that array onto a wand, and making it store several spells at once, able to be released, interrupted, even replenished at will, was another matter entirely, and far harder. There was a great deal of research still ahead of him. Still, this is a fine start, Eris thought, looking at the glowing array on the parchment, quiet satisfaction in his eyes. As long as he kept at it, he was certain he'd build that autocasting wand in the end. Over the days that followed, Eris pressed on with his research into the magic array, working to inscribe it onto a wand, and to make it hold several spells at once. It was slow, painstaking work, and setbacks were many, but he never once thought of giving up. Meanwhile, his study of time and space magic advanced as well. With the grounding the old master's portrait had given him, and his own diligence, his grasp of the magic deepened by the day. He could wield the Grey Death power far more freely now, and had even begun to attempt a few of the deeper applications of time and space magic. One day, in the room of requirement, Eris tried, for the first time, to use time and space magic to fold space. If he could master the art, he'd be able to cross vast distances in an instant, a spatial displacement not unlike apparition, but far more powerful and versatile. He drew a deep breath, then, following the method set down in the records of time and space, slowly gathered his magic and worked to fold the space before him. It was extraordinarily difficult. Folding space demanded immense magical power and exquisite control, and the least slip might tear the fabric of space, with dire consequences. Eris made the attempt with the greatest care, guiding his magic with painstaking precision. And though he didn't fully succeed, he did manage a first, faint fold in the space before him, proof that he'd grasped the rudiments of the art. It was a real beginning. Time and space magic truly is profound, Eris thought, a fire kindling in him despite the difficulty. But he wasn't discouraged. He knew that so long as he kept at it, he'd master it in the end, and when he did, his strength would take a genuine leap. As Eris pressed on with his studies and research, time slipped quietly by, and before he knew it, the term was nearing its end. The young wizard's end-of-year examinations had arrived. The exams covered every subject: charms, transfiguration, potions, history of magic, and the rest, and tested both theory and practical work. For most of the young wizards, it was a nerve-wracking ordeal. They'd spent the days before it cramming frantically, terrified of failing. For Eris, though, the exams held no terror at all. With his knowledge, and his talent, they were scarcely a challenge. He breezed through every paper, and came away with full marks in every subject, a result that left the other students, and the professors both, thoroughly astonished. Full marks in every subject. Eris really is a genius. As expected of the wizard, all the professors praised so highly. Merlin's beard, how does anyone score full marks in every subject? He's not even human. The young wizard's talk of Eris ran wild once more. His name had long since spread through the whole school. Now, with his flawless exam results, his fame climbed higher still. The professors, too, were full of praise. Flitwick, McGonagall, Sprout, even the cold and exacting Snape, every one of them, at the staff meeting, spoke well of Eris's showing in the exams. In their eyes, this student was gifted almost beyond belief, and his future certain to be extraordinary. Dumbledore, seated at the head of the table, listened to the professors praise Eris, and something complicated stirred behind his half-moon spectacles. This child truly is remarkable, he thought. And precisely because he is, I must guide him all the more carefully. I mustn't let him lose his way. The thought of Grindelwald was never far from his mind. While the professors discussed Eris, and the young wizards buzzed over his flawless marks, Eris himself paid none of it any heed. His mind was on another matter entirely, for through Iris's eyes, he'd caught wind of something. Quirrell was on the move again. With the term's end drawing near, Quirrell had plainly decided he could wait no longer. He meant to make his attempt on the Philosopher's Stone. Through Iris's eyes, Eris saw the man slip, under cover of night, toward the third-floor forbidden corridor, where the stone lay hidden. So it's begun, Eris thought, a light kindling in his eyes. He remembered that in the original story, this was about the time Quirrell made his move on the stone, and Harry, Ronald, and Hermione, learning of it, had gone after him, to try to stop him. Sure enough, before long, Harry and his two friends appeared as well. Through Iris's eyes, Eris watched the three of them make their way, warily, toward the third-floor corridor, plainly meaning to stop Quirrell from taking the stone. The story's holding to its course, Eris thought, watching the scene. He knew how it would end. Quirrell would fail to get the stone, and Voldemort's remnant would be driven off by Harry. But he'd no intention of leaving everything to the plot. He had Iris keep her invisible watch close over Harry and the others, ready to step in the instant anything strayed from its course. He himself, meanwhile, made no move to intervene. He knew that if he stepped in rashly, he might disrupt the plot's own momentum, and bring troubles of his own. Better to watch quietly through Iris's eyes, and act only if something truly went wrong. Through the little dragon's eyes, Eris saw Harry and his friend slip past the three-headed dog, lulling it to sleep with music, just as Quirrell had, and drop through the trapdoor into the depths below, one obstacle after another falling behind them as they pressed on toward the stone. It seems the real test is about to begin, Eris thought, his gaze turning deep. He knew that beyond the trapdoor lay obstacle upon obstacle, each set by a different professor, and that at the very end, Harry would face Quirrell, and the master hidden within him, alone. That was the true climax of this whole affair. Eris settled himself, and through Iris's eyes, watched closely as it all unfolded. Whatever happened, he was ready to act at a moment's notice. Through Iris's eyes, Eris watched Harry and his friends press on, past one obstacle after another. The first, beyond the trapdoor, was a great tangle of devil's snare. The plant's tendrils lashed out, seizing the three of them at once, coiling tighter the more they struggled. But Hermione kept her head. She recalled that devil's snare feared fire and light, and with a burst of flame drove the tendrils back, freeing them all. Past the devil's snare, they came to a chamber filled with hundreds of winged keys, swarming through the air. To open the door beyond, they had to catch the one right key among them. Harry, quick and skilled on a broomstick, took to the air, and after a spell of frantic chasing seized the key at last, and opened the door. Beyond it lay an enormous chessboard, its pieces towering giants of black and white stone. To cross, they had to win a game of wizard's chess. Ronald, a fine chess player, took command, and in the end, to win the game, sacrificed himself, letting the opposing side take his piece so that Harry might checkmate the White King. The chessman struck Ronald down, and he crumpled, unconscious, to the board. Watching through Iris's eyes, Eris couldn't help a flicker of feeling. Ronald really is a loyal friend. For Harry's sake, he'd risk his own life. Though he knew Ronald would come to no lasting harm, the boy's willingness to sacrifice himself for his friend was genuinely moving. Hermione stayed behind to tend to the fallen Ronald, while Harry pressed on alone. Past the chessboard, he came to another chamber, where a troll already lay senseless on the floor, felled, it seemed, by someone ahead of him. Harry pressed on. At the next chamber, a riddle of potions barred the way. 7 bottles stood in a row, and only one held the potion that would let him through the black fire ahead, another would carry him back through the purple fire behind. The rest were poison, or useless. It was a test of logic, not magic. Hermione, had she been there, would have solved it in a moment, but Harry, working it through with the knowledge she'd have brought, found the right bottle, drank it and stepped through the black flames. Beyond the black fire lay the last chamber, and there, at last, Harry came face to face with the one behind it all. Not Snape, as he'd expected. But Quirrell. You. Harry stared, thunderstruck. He'd been certain the one after the stone was Snape. Yes, me. Quirrell smiled, cold and eerie, no trace of his stammer left. You never suspected me, did you? After all, who'd suspect poor, stammering Professor Quirrell? In the middle of the chamber stood a great mirror, the mirror of Erist. Quirrell stood before it, plainly trying to work out how to get the stone from within it. For the mirror was the stone's last protection, only one who wished to find the stone, but not to use it, could draw it forth. Watching through Iris's eyes, Eris knew the true climax had come. Now we'll see whether the story holds to its course, he thought, his gaze fixed and intent. He knew that here, before the mirror of Erist, Harry would face Quirrell, and the master hidden within him, and that Voldemort's remnant would, in the end, be driven off. But he kept Iris's watch close over Harry all the same, ready to step in the instant anything went truly wrong. Quirrell, unable to fathom the mirror's secret, turned at last to Harry. Come here, he ordered. Look in the mirror, and tell me what you see. He'd guessed the boy might hold the key to the mirror's riddle. Harry stepped, warily, before the mirror of Erist. And in that instant, an extraordinary thing happened, for as he gazed into the glass, wishing only to find the stone and keep it from Voldemort, never to use it himself, he felt a sudden weight drop into his pocket. The stone's last protection had worked exactly as its maker intended, the stone had passed, unseen, into Harry's keeping. But Harry kept his face still, and lied. I see myself, shaking hands with Dumbledore. I've won the House Cup for Gryffindor. He lies. A cold, terrible voice rang out, not from Quirrell's mouth, but from somewhere beneath his turban. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you aren't strong enough. I have strength enough for this. Watching through Iris's eyes, Eris knew what was coming. Voldemort's about to show himself, he thought, his gaze sharpening. This was the true climax of the whole affair, the moment Harry would come face to face with the remnant of the Dark Lord who'd murdered his parents. At Voldemort's command, Quirrell reached up, trembling, and slowly began to unwind the turban about his head. As the cloth fell away, a sight met Harry's eyes that turned his blood cold. There, upon the back of Quirrell's head, was a face, a hideous, chalk-white face, its eyes red as blood, its nostrils mere slits, like a serpent's. It was the most dreadful face Harry had ever seen. Harry Potter. The face spoke, its voice a cold, thin hiss. See what I have become. A mere shadow, a wraith. I have form only when I share another's body. But there are those who would let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has sustained me these weeks, and once I have the elixir of life, I shall make a body of my own again. Voldemort's red eyes bored into Harry. Now, give me the stone in your pocket. Harry's heart lurched. So Voldemort knew he had the stone. He turned at once to run, but Quirrell was faster, a wave of his hand, and flames sprang up around the chamber, sealing every way out. Harry was trapped. Seize him. Voldemort ordered. Take the stone. Quirrell lunged for Harry. But the instant his hand closed on the boy's wrist, he gave a scream of agony and snatched it back, for the flesh where he'd touched Harry had blistered and burned, as though seared by a red-hot iron. What magic is this? Quirrell stared at his blistered hand in horror. Kill him. Kill the boy. Voldemort's voice rang out, frantic. Quirrell steeled himself and lunged again, but the moment his skin met Harry's, the burning seized him afresh, worse than before. Harry, half by instinct, seized Quirrell's face in both hands and held on. Quirrell shrieked, his flesh blistering and cracking beneath the boy's touch, crumbling away like scorched ash. Watching through Iris's eyes, Eris knew this was the mother's love protection Lily had left upon Harry, a shield Voldemort, steeped in hatred, could not so much as touch. In the original story, it was this protection that let Harry hold Quirrell off until Dumbledore arrived, driving Voldemort's remnant away at last. But then, in the next instant, Eris's eyes narrowed, for the scene had begun, subtly, to stray from its course. Quirrell, his body crumbling, made in his final moment a desperate choice. Rather than fall with his failing frame, he loosed a spell at Harry, a curse of pure, killing malice, meant to drag the boy down with him. That's not right, Eris thought, his gaze snapping sharp. In the original story, Quirrell had simply crumbled to ash, and Voldemort's remnant fled Harry's body. There'd been no such final, deadly curse. This was a divergence, and one that put Harry in real danger. He didn't hesitate. Through their bond, he loosed a single command to Iris. Protect Harry, now. In the same instant, the little red dragon, watching invisibly from a corner of the chamber, moved. A streak of red light flashed across the room, and just as Quirrell's curse bore down on Harry, Iris threw herself into its path. A muffled impact. The curse struck the little dragon square on, but Iris, a creature of no ordinary bloodline, took the blow and was flung back, only shaken, unhurt in any lasting way. The curse meant to kill Harry had been turned aside. Harry stared, dumbstruck, at the little red dragon that had appeared from nowhere to shield him. He hadn't the faintest idea where the creature had come from, only that it had, in that moment, saved his life. Quirrell, meanwhile, his last strength spent on that final curse, crumbled away entirely, collapsing into a heap of ash. From the ruin of him, a shadow tore free, the remnant of Voldemort's soul, and, with a shriek of rage and hatred, fled the chamber, passing straight through Harry as it went. Harry clutched at his scar, a searing pain lancing through his head, and crumpled to the floor, senseless. Watching through Iris's eyes, Eris let out a long breath. That was closer than it should have been. Had he not had Iris standing ready, that final curse of Quirrell's might well have cost Harry his life, and the whole course of the story after would have been thrown into chaos. It seems my being here really has begun to change things, Eris thought, his gaze turning deep. Small as this divergence was, it was a warning. He could no longer take it for granted that the plot would hold to its course. From here on, he'd have to watch all the more closely, and be ready, always, to act. He had Iris slip quietly from the chamber before anyone came, careful that no one should learn of the little dragon's part in it. Then, through their bond, he confirmed she'd taken no lasting harm, and only then let himself be easy. Rest well, Iris, Eris thought, a warmth stirring in him despite everything. You did well tonight. Had it not been for the little dragon, tonight might have ended very differently. Not long after, Dumbledore arrived at the underground chamber. He'd learned of Quirrell's move on the stone, and hurried down at once, only to find Harry lying senseless on the floor, Quirrell already crumbled to ash, and no sign of the stone's thief anywhere. Voldemort's remnant, plainly, had fled. Dumbledore gathered Harry up and bore him swiftly to the hospital wing, where Madame Pomfrey took him in hand. Though Harry had fainted, he'd taken no lasting harm, a spell of rest, and he'd be well again. But something troubled Dumbledore. Examining the chamber, he'd found, upon the floor, a trace of magic that ought not to have been there, the residue of a spell, one he couldn't place. It was faint, nearly gone, but to a wizard of Dumbledore's power, unmistakable. Strange, Dumbledore thought, his brow furrowing. This magic, it wasn't Quirrell's, nor Harry's. Whose, then? He recalled that when he'd arrived, Quirrell had already crumbled to ash, and Harry lay senseless. By all appearances, the two had fought, and Harry had somehow driven Quirrell off. But this stray trace of magic hinted that someone else had been in the chamber that night, someone who'd left before he came. Who else was here? Dumbledore turned it over, but could find no answer. The trace was too faint, he couldn't tell whose magic it was, only that it hadn't belonged to Quirrell or Harry. He said nothing of it to anyone, and quietly filed the matter away in his heart. He meant to look into it further, to learn who, exactly, had been in that chamber, and what part they'd played. Meanwhile, Eris knew nothing of Dumbledore's suspicions. Through Iris's eyes, he'd seen the old wizard arrive, take Harry up, and bear him to the hospital wing, and, judging everything settled, had recalled the little dragon, and let the matter rest. It seems this affair's drawing to a close, Eris thought, quiet relief settling over him. Though there'd been a divergence at the end, Harry had come through safe, and Voldemort's remnant been driven off. On the whole, things had held near enough to the story's course. Still, that final divergence weighed on him. I can't take it for granted any longer that the plot will hold, he thought, his gaze turning grave. My being here has begun to change things, small changes now, but who knows how great they may grow in time. From here on, he'd have to watch all the more closely, and be ready always to act. He gave a moment's thought, too, to that stray trace Iris's spell might have left in the chamber. But he judged it no great matter, Iris's magic was of no ordinary kind, and even Dumbledore would find it hard to trace to its source. Still, to be safe, he resolved to have Iris take greater care in future, and leave as little trace as she could. The next morning, word of the night's events had spread through the school. The young wizards buzzed over it, though most had only the vaguest, most garbled notion of what had truly happened, that someone had tried to steal something hidden in the castle, and been stopped by Harry Potter. Did you hear? Harry Potter fought off a thief last night, all on his own. Amazing, as expected of the boy who lived. But what was the thief even after? What's hidden in the castle? No idea. The professors are keeping it quiet. The young wizards speculated wildly, none of them guessing that the truth behind it was far graver than any of them imagined, or that a first year in their own school had, through a dragon's eyes, watched the whole hidden affair unfold, and even, at the last, quietly turned aside the curse that would have killed the boy who lived. Eris paid the talk no mind. He went about his days as steadily as ever, meditating, farming his quests, studying time and space magic, working at his array. But somewhere in his heart, he'd grown quietly more watchful. That final divergence had put him on his guard. He knew, now, that the road ahead might hold changes he couldn't foresee, and he had to be ready for them. A few days on, Harry woke in the hospital wing. Dumbledore came to see him, and told him, in part, the truth of what had happened, that the thing hidden in the castle was the Philosopher's Stone, and that the one after it had been Voldemort, driven off, for now, though not destroyed. He would return, one day. As for the stone, Dumbledore said, it had been destroyed, to keep it from ever falling into the wrong hands. Harry told Dumbledore, too, of the strange little red dragon that had appeared from nowhere to save him at the last. But Dumbledore only frowned, and shook his head, for he'd never heard of such a creature at Hogwarts, and could not say where it had come from. Yet inwardly, the tale only deepened his misgivings. That stray trace of magic in the chamber, and now this mysterious dragon, the two, surely, were connected. Someone had been in that chamber, someone with a strange and powerful magic, who'd saved Harry at the crucial moment. But who? Dumbledore turned it over and over, and still could find no answer. He resolved to look into the matter more closely still, to uncover, at last, the identity of that hidden figure. Before long, the term drew to its close, and the day of the leaving feast arrived. The great hall was decked out grandly for the occasion. The banners and hangings about the hall showed the colors of Slytherin, for Slytherin had won the House Cup that year, with the most house points of any house. But just as the feast was about to begin, Dumbledore rose, and awarded a great many last-minute points, to Harry, Ronald, and Hermione, for their courage in going after the stone, and to Neville, for his bravery in standing up to his friends. With those points, Gryffindor overtook Slytherin at the last, and won the House Cup instead. The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers, the students wild with joy. The Slytherins, meanwhile, wore faces black as thunder, snatched of the cup at the very last moment, none of them best pleased. Eris watched the scene from the Ravenclaw table, a faint smile crossing his face. So the story holds here too. Gryffindor takes the House Cup at the last. Whatever small changes his arrival had wrought, this scene, at least, had run its course unchanged. The hangings about the hall changed at Dumbledore's word from Slytherin's green to Gryffindor's scarlet and gold, and the feast began in earnest. The young wizards ate and laughed and made merry, the mood warm and bright. Eris chatted idly with Terry and Anthony as he ate, his eyes drifting, now and then, to the Gryffindor table, where Harry, Ronald, and Hermione sat together, laughing, the very picture of friendship. He couldn't help a small smile. Whatever his arrival had changed, the friendship of these three, it seemed, had formed all the same. Perhaps some things truly were meant to be. The feast over, the young wizards began to make ready to go home for the summer. There was a lightness in the air, the holiday come at last, and with it the chance to see their families again. The next morning, the students boarded the Hogwarts Express to return home. Eris packed his things, said his farewells to Terry, Anthony, and the others, and boarded the train as well. On the journey back, Eris happened once more to share a compartment with Harry, Ronald, and Hermione. The four of them talked of all that had happened over the year, the mood easy and warm. "Eris, where will you spend the summer?" Hermione asked. "I'll go home, most likely, see my family." Eris smiled, giving nothing away. "That's good. I'll be going home too, I've missed my parents." Hermione smiled. "But I'll miss Hogwarts. It's been such a wonderful year. There'll be plenty more years yet." Eris smiled. "We've 6 more to go, after all." "You're right." Hermione's eyes brightened. "I can't wait for next year already." The four talked on, the miles slipping by, until at last the train pulled into the station. Getting off, Eris saw a familiar figure waiting on the platform. It was Henry. "Young master." The moment Henry saw Eris, he hurried forward, bowing respectfully, his face alight with joy. "You've come home at last. Everyone's been waiting for you. Thank you for coming to meet me, Henry." Eris nodded with a smile. Just then, another small figure came flying toward him from off to the side. "Big brother." It was Luna. She threw herself into Eris's arms, her face bright with a joy she couldn't contain. "Big brother, I've missed you so. You've been at Hogwarts a whole year, do you know how much I've missed you?" "I've missed you too, Luna." Eris reached out and gently stroked the girl's long golden hair, warmth filling his chest. A year apart, and reunited at last, he'd missed the dreamy, gentle girl more than he'd let himself feel. "Big brother, next year I can go to Hogwarts with you. Then we'll never have to be apart again." Luna looked up at him, her eyes shining with anticipation. Next year, we'll go to Hogwarts together." Eris nodded with a smile, and something warm and certain settled in him. He knew that come next year, Luna would be old enough for school, and then he'd be able to look after her at Hogwarts himself, the two of them together, side by side. Watching the reunion of the two, Henry smiled, a warmth of his own rising in him. The young master and Miss Luna truly are a joy to behold. With the two of them together, the Shafik house is sure to grow warmer, and brighter, day by day. And so Eris's first year at Hogwarts drew to its close. Over that year, he'd grown enormously, in strength, in knowledge, in his research. And he'd learned the truth of his own crossing, come to know the Shafik family's time and space magic, and, at the very last, quietly turned aside a curse that would have changed the whole course of the story. The road ahead was long, and far from smooth. But Eris wasn't afraid. With his talent, the loyalty of the Barton family, the guidance of the old master's portrait, and the dreamy, gentle girl at his side, he was certain that one day he'd grow strong enough to wake the old masters, to restore the Shafik house, and to face whatever storms the future might bring. A new year, a new beginning, Eris thought, looking at Luna beside him, quiet resolve and warmth mingling in his eyes. "The road ahead is long, but I'll walk it, one step at a time, and grow stronger with every step." Over the break, Eris divided his days between study and research. Each morning he'd meditate, tempering his magic and raising his magic value, then, under the old master's portrait's guidance, he'd study the Shafik family's time and space magic, and in his free hours he'd press on with his research into the magic array, working toward the auto-casting wand he envisioned. His strength grew by the day. With the old master's portrait to guide him, his grasp of time and space magic deepened swiftly, far faster than it had at Hogwarts, where he'd had to puzzle it out alone. He could wield the grey death power far more freely now, and had made real progress with the folding of space besides, able, at last, to manage a short spatial displacement, crossing a small distance in the blink of an eye. "Child, your progress is truly astonishing." Watching Eris master the arts so quickly, the old master's portrait could not hide its admiration. In all the history of the Shafik house, there have been few with a gift for time and space magic to match yours. It seems the family's last safeguard chose exactly the right soul. "You flatter me, elder." Eris smiled. He knew his swift progress owed much to Merlin's notes, and to the talents the system had given him. Without them, mastering so profound a magic in so short a time would have been impossible. "Elder, I've a question I'd like to ask." Eris thought a moment, then looked to the old master's portrait. The letter said the old masters sealed themselves within time and space. "Do you know, where, exactly, are they sealed? And how might I reach that place?" At the question, the old master's portrait fell silent a while, then answered slowly. "Child, the old masters sealed themselves within the folds of time and space, a place beyond the reach of ordinary wizards. To reach it, you'd need a mastery of time and space magic deep enough to open a passage through the fold, and step inside." He looked at Eris gravely. "But that will require you to grow far, far stronger than you are now. With your present strength, you couldn't even find the place, let alone open the way to it." Eris nodded slowly. He'd guessed as much. To wake the old masters, he would first have to master time and space magic, and for that, he needed to grow stronger still. Elder, I understand. Eris looked at the portrait, resolve in his eyes. I'll study time and space magic with everything I have, and grow strong enough to reach the old masters, and wake them from where they sleep. At his words, something like gratification kindled in the old master's eyes. Good. A worthy descendant of the Shafik house. The portrait nodded. Child, since your resolve is firm, I'll teach you the deeper arts of time and space magic. But you must remember, this magic is as perilous as it is profound. You must never wield it carelessly, lest you bring calamity down upon yourself. I understand, Elder. Eris nodded gravely. And so, over the summer, Eris studied the deeper arts of time and space magic under the old master's portrait's guidance. His grasp of the magic deepened by the day, and his strength climbed at a pace that astonished even the old master. Of course, he didn't neglect Luna. Whenever he had a free moment, he'd spend it with her, teaching her a little magic, or simply talking, or taking her out to wander the grounds of the estate. Luna delighted in it. A year apart, and reunited at last, she clung to Eris's side, plainly making up for all the time they'd been kept apart. And with next year's start of term drawing nearer, she grew more eager by the day, for then she'd be able to go to Hogwarts with Eris, and never be parted from him again. Big brother, will I really be able to go to Hogwarts with you next year? Luna asked one day, her eyes shining with anticipation. Of course. Next year you'll be old enough for school, and we'll go to Hogwarts together. Eris smiled and stroked her hair. Wonderful. Then I can be with Big Brother every day. Luna's face lit up with joy. Big Brother, when we're at Hogwarts, will you teach me magic? I want to be as good as you. Of course I'll teach you. Eris nodded with a smile. But you must work hard, and study hard, if you want to grow strong. I'll work hard, I promise. Luna nodded firmly, resolve shining in her eyes. Watching the girl's earnest little face, Eris couldn't help a smile, warmth filling his chest. He knew Luna was working hard for his sake, and he quietly resolved that once she came to Hogwarts, he'd take the very best care of her, and teach her all he could. The summer slipped by day, in study and in the quiet company of Luna. And before Eris knew it, the holiday was nearing its end, and a new term at Hogwarts was drawing near. This year, though, would be different from the last. For this year, Luna would be starting Hogwarts too. A few days before the new term, Eris took Luna to Diagon Alley to buy her school things. Since Luna was starting Hogwarts this year, she needed a full set of supplies, robes, textbooks, a cauldron, and the rest. And of course, most important of all, a wand. Big brother, I'm so excited. I can finally have my own wand. As they walked through Diagon Alley, Luna could scarcely contain her delight, her eyes darting eagerly from shop to shop. Don't be in such a rush. Eris smiled, taking her hand to keep the crowd from pulling them apart. We'll get everything you need today. With Henry along to see to it, the shopping went smoothly. Before long they'd bought Luna's robes, her textbooks, her cauldron, and all the rest, everything but the wand. Big brother, are we going to Ollivander's now? Luna asked, plainly eager, as they left Madame Malkin's. Let's go and find you a wand. Eris nodded with a smile. But Luna wouldn't be getting an ordinary wand off Ollivander's shelves. Eris had long since resolved to have a custom wand made for her, one suited to her exactly, just as his own had been. He'd already had Henry gather the materials. Today, they'd take them to Ollivander, and have him craft Luna a wand of her very own. Reaching Ollivander's, the door swung open of its own accord before they'd so much as knocked. Ah, Mr. Shafik. I rather thought you'd be back. From behind the counter, Ollivander looked up at Eris, then his gaze fell upon Luna beside him. And this young lady is... This is Luna. She's starting Hogwarts this year, so we've come to have a wand made for her. Eris introduced her with a smile. I see. Ollivander nodded, then looked at Luna with interest. A custom wand, is it? Then let me first get a sense of the young lady's magic. Ollivander had Luna try several ready-made wands, gauging her magic by their response. He soon had a feel for it. Luna's magic, it turned out, carried a gentle, dreamy quality all its own, quite unlike any he'd met before. The young lady's magic is most unusual, gentle, and with a curiously, otherworldly air to it. Ollivander looked at Luna, a light of interest in his eyes. For a magic like this, the wand's materials must be chosen with great care. Mr. Ollivander, we've brought materials of our own. Just then Henry stepped forward, a case in his hands. I hope these will serve for the young lady's wand. Ollivander opened the case, and his eyes lit up at once. Within lay several rare and precious wand materials, every one of them, plainly, a treasure. Splendid materials indeed. Ollivander looked them over, nodding his approval. Then he selected two from among them. For the young lady's magic, I think these two will suit her best. Unicorn hair, for the core, gentle, and pure, a fine match for her nature. And for the wood, cherry, I think. Cherry brings out the finer, more delicate powers of a wand, just the thing for a magic like the young lady's. Then I'll trouble you to make it, Mr. Ollivander. Eris nodded. It would be my pleasure. Ollivander smiled. Give me 3 days or so, and the young lady's wand will be ready. After settling the matter of Luna's wand, Eris took her on through Diagon Alley, to see to the last of her supplies, and to show her the sights besides. Luna delighted in it all. For her, everything about the coming term was new, and wonderful, and she could scarcely wait for the day she'd set foot in Hogwarts at last. Big brother, once we're at Hogwarts, we'll be in the same house, won't we? Luna asked, looking up at Eris, her eyes full of hope. That depends on the Sorting Hat. Eris smiled, then, seeing the flicker of disappointment cross her face, added, but don't worry. With your character, you're very likely to be sorted into Ravenclaw, same as me. Really? Luna's face lit up again at once. Then we'll be in the same house. Big brother, I'll definitely get into Ravenclaw. Watching the girl's earnest delight, Eris couldn't help a smile. He knew Luna's dreamy, clever nature suited Ravenclaw well. The odds were good she'd be sorted there. And then the two of them would be in the same house, and he could look after her all the more easily. The day's shopping done, Eris took Luna home to the estate. Over the next few days, they made the last of their preparations for the term, and waited for Luna's wand to be ready. 3 days on, word came from Ollivander, Luna's wand was finished. Eris took Luna back to Ollivander's to collect her wand. Here it is, the young lady's wand. Ollivander lifted a slender wand from its case and handed it to Luna, his voice warm. Cherry, with a unicorn hair core, 10¼ inches. A gentle wand, and supple, well suited to the young lady's magic. Luna took the wand, and the moment it touched her hand, a soft light bloomed from its tip, and a gentle warmth spread through her. Plainly, the wand and she were a fine match. It chose me. The wand chose me. Luna's face lit up with delight, and she looked at Eris, her eyes shining. Big brother, look, my very own wand. It suits you beautifully. Eris smiled and nodded. He could tell the wand fit Luna well. With it in hand, her spellcasting would come far more easily. Thank you, Mr. Ollivander. Luna beamed at the wand maker, brimming with gratitude. It was my pleasure, young lady. Ollivander smiled. I hope this wand serves you well at Hogwarts. Wand in hand, Luna could scarcely wait for term to begin. She'd wave it about now and then, trying to cast the simple spells Eris had taught her, and though she couldn't yet manage them well, the joy on her face never dimmed. Big brother, when we're at Hogwarts, you'll teach me more magic, won't you? Luna looked up at Eris, her eyes full of hope. Of course. Eris smiled and stroked her hair. But you must be patient. Magic isn't learned in a day, you have to build it up, bit by bit. I'll work hard, I promise. Luna nodded firmly. Before long, the last day of the holiday arrived, and it was time to leave for Hogwarts. That morning, Eris and Luna made their final preparations, then, with Henry to see them off, set out for King's Cross Station. Young master, Miss Luna, do take care of yourselves at school. As they reached the station, Henry looked at the two of them, warm with feeling. Should you ever need anything, you've only to send word, and the Barton family will do all it can to help. Thank you, Henry. Eris nodded. And we'll trouble you to look after the estate while we're away. You needn't say it, young master. It's our duty. Henry smiled. After his farewells to Henry, Eris led Luna toward the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, the way onto platform 9 3/4. Big brother, do we really just walk straight through the wall? Luna looked at the solid barrier, a little nervous. For all her dreamy fearlessness, the prospect of walking headlong into a wall gave even her pause. Just walk straight at it, and don't stop. Eris smiled, taking her hand. Don't be afraid, I'll go with you. All right, I trust you, big brother. Luna nodded, took a deep breath, and, hand in hand with Eris, walked toward the wall. The next instant, the two of them passed clean through the barrier, and platform 9 3/4 opened up before them. The platform was thronged with witches and wizards, and with students bound for Hogwarts, the whole place abuzz. The great scarlet Hogwarts Express stood alongside, gouting white steam, ready to bear the young wizards off to school. Wow, so this is platform 9 3/4. Luna gazed at the scene, her eyes wide with wonder. For her, everything about it was new, and marvelous. Come on, let's find a compartment and get settled. Eris smiled, taking her hand and leading her toward the train. The two of them boarded, and found an empty compartment. Before long, a familiar face appeared at the door. Eris. It was Hermione Granger. She'd spotted Eris and come straight over, plainly delighted. It's so good to see you. How was your summer? Not bad. And yours? Eris smiled. Wonderful. I read no end of books over the holiday, and learned all sorts of new magic. Hermione's eyes shone, then fell on Luna beside him, and a flicker of curiosity crossed them. And this is Luna. She's starting Hogwarts this year. Eris introduced them with a smile. Luna, this is Hermione, a friend of mine. Hello, Hermione. Luna gave her that dreamy, gentle smile. Hello, Luna. Hermione smiled back, then turned to Eris, curious. Eris, is Luna your sister? Something like that. Eris smiled, giving nothing away. Hermione plainly caught that there was more to it, but she didn't press. She only sat down across from them, and the three fell to talking of all that had happened over the summer, the mood easy and warm. Before long, Harry and Ronald appeared at the compartment door as well. Eris. The two spotted him and came in, grinning. Harry, Ronald, how were your summers? Eris asked with a smile. Don't ask. Ronald pulled a face. I spent the whole summer helping my mum with chores. So dull. Mine was all right. Harry smiled, though a shadow crossed his face as he said it. Plainly his summer at the Dursleys hadn't been an easy one. Eris caught the look, but said nothing. He knew Harry's home life was far from happy, but that was Harry's own affair, and not for him to meddle in. The five of them crowded into the one compartment, talking and laughing, the miles slipping by. And before they knew it, the Hogwarts Express had borne them off toward the castle, and a brand new year. Before long, the Hogwarts Express pulled in at the Hogsmeade station. First years, this way. First years, follow me. On the platform, Hagrid's familiar booming voice rang out, calling the new students to gather round. Big brother, I have to go with the other first years, don't I? Luna looked at Eris, a flicker of reluctance in her eyes. She'd only just been reunited with him, and now they had to part again. First years cross the Black Lake by boat to reach the castle, it's a Hogwarts tradition. Eris smiled and stroked her hair, reassuring her. Don't worry, we'll see each other again at the sorting. All right. Luna nodded, then, with a wave to Eris, went off with Hagrid and the other first years. Eris watched her go, a warmth stirring in him. He knew that after tonight's sorting, Luna would truly be a Hogwarts student, and, most likely, in the same house as him. Then the two of them would never be parted again. Along with the older students, Eris took a carriage up to the castle. The carriages were drawn by thestrals, creatures only those who'd witnessed death could see. Eris, of course, could see them clearly. The great black winged horses were, to him, a familiar sight. Reaching the castle, Eris made his way to the great hall with the other students, and took his seat at the Ravenclaw table, waiting for the sorting to begin. Before long, Professor McGonagall led the new first years into the hall. Eris's gaze went at once to Luna among them, and he saw the girl looking about the hall, wide-eyed with wonder, plainly enchanted by everything she saw. When her eyes found Eris at the Ravenclaw table, her whole face lit up, and she gave him a little wave. Eris smiled and waved back, a warmth filling his chest. The sorting began. Professor McGonagall read out the names one by one, and each first year in turn came forward, sat upon the stool, and had the sorting hat placed upon their head, to be assigned a house. Eris paid the other first year's sortings little mind. His eyes were on Luna alone, waiting for her name to be called. At last, Professor McGonagall read it out. Luna Lovegood. Luna drew a deep breath, then walked up to the sorting hat. Passing the Ravenclaw table, she shot Eris a look, and he gave her an encouraging nod. At that, the nervousness on her face eased, and she went on to the stool, and sat, and let McGonagall place the sorting hat upon her head. The hat stirred atop the girl's head. A dreamy child, and clever, with a mind all her own. A voice sounded in Luna's mind. And a thirst for knowledge, too. Yes, I think I know where to put you. Ravenclaw. The sorting hat's verdict rang out, and cheers went up at once from the Ravenclaw table. Luna's face bloomed with joy, for she'd been sorted into the same house as Eris, just as she'd hoped. Congratulations. Professor McGonagall lifted the hat from Luna's head, and pointed her toward the Ravenclaw table with a smile. Off you go, your housemates are waiting for you. Luna hopped down from the stool and ran straight for the Ravenclaw table, for Eris. Big brother. I got into Ravenclaw. We're in the same house. Luna's face was bright with a joy she couldn't contain. Well done. Eris smiled and made room for her beside him. Come, sit here. Luna sat down happily at Eris's side, plainly delighted to be in the same house as him. The other Ravenclaws welcomed the new first year warmly, and, seeing how close she was with Eris, took to her all the more. So this is your sister, Eris? Beside them, Terry looked at Luna, curious. Something like that. Eris smiled, giving nothing away. Hello, I'm Terry. Welcome to Ravenclaw. Terry greeted Luna with a grin. Hello, Terry. Luna gave him that dreamy, gentle smile. The other Ravenclaws introduced themselves to Luna in turn, and she greeted each of them in that easy, airy way of hers. Before long, she'd grown familiar with her new housemates. Once the sorting was done, Dumbledore rose and said a few words, and then the feast began. The tables filled with every kind of delicacy, and the young wizards ate and talked and made merry, the mood warm and bright. Luna, seated at Eris's side, was plainly in the highest of spirits. She tried a little of everything on the table, chattering away to Eris all the while, telling him how she felt about Hogwarts, and everything she'd seen and heard. Eris listened patiently to every word, a smile never leaving his face. Watching the two of them, the other Ravenclaws couldn't help a smile of their own. Plainly, this pair of siblings, for so they took them, were uncommonly close. And so, with Luna's arrival, Eris's second year at Hogwarts began, and it promised to be livelier by far than the last. After the feast, the prefects led the first years off to their house common rooms. Since Luna and Eris were in the same house, they walked together toward the Ravenclaw Tower. "Big brother, is it true the Ravenclaw common room has the finest view in all of Hogwarts?" Luna asked, looking up at Eris, her eyes full of anticipation. She remembered Eris telling her, back in his letters, of the view from the Ravenclaw Tower. You'll see for yourself in a moment." Eris smiled. Reaching the top of the tower, they came to the door of the Ravenclaw common room, where the eagle-shaped bronze knocker waited. To enter Ravenclaw's common room, you have to answer the knocker's riddle. Eris explained to Luna. "That's Ravenclaw's own way of doing things, no passwords, only riddles. Answer rightly, and the door opens." As he spoke, the bronze knocker sounded, and posed its riddle. "What has roots that nobody sees, is taller than trees, up, up it goes, and yet never grows." At the riddle, several of the first years fell to frowning and puzzling over it. But Luna's eyes lit up at once, and she answered without hesitation. "A mountain." "Correct, the answer is right." The knocker sounded again, and the common room door swung slowly open. "Luna, well done." Eris looked at the girl, a little surprised, and praised her generously. He'd known Luna was clever, but not that she'd answer the riddle so readily. It was an easy one. Luna smiled, giving a modest little shrug, though the pride in her eyes was plain. The other first years looked at Luna with new respect. Plainly, this dreamy little girl was cleverer by far than she appeared. They stepped into the common room, and the Ravenclaw Tower's famous view opened up before them. Through the great windows, one could see the mountains in the distance, and the black lake below, and the whole of Hogwarts grounds beside, a sight of breathtaking beauty. "Wow, it's beautiful." Luna gazed at the view, her eyes wide with wonder. "Big brother, you were right, the view really is the finest in all of Hogwarts." "I told you so." Eris smiled. Luna ran to the window and pressed close to the glass, drinking in the view, plainly enchanted. Eris watched her, a warmth filling his chest. He knew Luna would love it here. The Ravenclaw Tower, with its beautiful view and its air of quiet learning, suited her dreamy, clever nature perfectly. After a while exploring the common room, the first years were led off by a prefect to their dormitories. Luna, of course, would room with the other first-year Ravenclaw girls. "Big brother, do I really have to sleep in a different room from you?" Luna looked at Eris, a flicker of reluctance in her eyes. She'd only just been reunited with him, and now they had to sleep apart. Boys and girls have separate dormitories, that's the rule." Eris smiled and stroked her hair, reassuring her. "Don't worry, we're in the same house now. We can see each other every day." "All right." Luna nodded, the reluctance easing from her face. "Off you go and rest, then. We've lessons tomorrow." Eris smiled. "And if you need anything, just come and find me." "Good night, big brother." Luna gave Eris a wave, then went off happily with the other first-year girls. Watching her go, Eris smiled, then turned and made for his own dormitory. Since he still had his single room, Professor Flitwick had kept the arrangement for him this year too. He could let Iris out to play whenever he liked, without fear of any other eyes. Back in his room, Eris summoned Iris from the pet space. Wah! The little red dragon sprang at once into his arms, chattering away, plainly telling him how she'd missed him. All right, I know. Iris missed me." Eris stroked her head, smiling. Through their bond, he could feel the little dragon's joy, and it warmed him. Once he'd settled Iris, Eris took out the records of time and space and studied a while, as he did each night. Then, when it grew late, he put the book away and lay down to sleep. His second year at Hogwarts had begun, and with Luna at his side now, it promised to be a livelier, and happier, year by far than the last. The next morning, Eris rose early to meditate, as was his habit, tempering his magic. That done, he went to find Luna, to take her down to the great hall for breakfast. "Big brother, good morning." The moment she saw Eris, Luna's face lit up, and she ran to his side. "Morning, Luna. Sleep well?" Eris asked with a smile. The bed's so comfortable, and my roommates are all so nice." Luna nodded happily. Plainly, she'd taken to life at Hogwarts already. "That's good." Eris smiled. "Come on, let's go and have breakfast. Then we've our first lessons of the year." The two of them made their way down to the great hall together, chatting as they went, the mood easy and warm, and drawing more than a few glances from the students they passed, all of them curious about this close-knit pair of Ravenclaw siblings. After breakfast came the day's first lessons. Since Luna was a first year and Eris a second, their timetables were, of course, different. The two of them had to part ways at the door of the great hall, each off to their own class. "Big brother, I'm off to my lesson now." Luna waved to Eris, plainly a little reluctant to part. "Off you go, and mind you listen carefully in class." Eris smiled and stroked her hair. "If there's anything you don't understand, come and ask me after." "I will." Luna nodded, then went off happily to her lesson. Watching her go, Eris smiled, then turned and made for his own class. Luna's first lesson was Charms, with Professor Flitwick. As it happened, this was the very professor Eris had so impressed the year before, and Flitwick, seeing Luna's surname on the register, and knowing her for Eris's sister, took a particular interest in her from the start. "You must be Luna. Eris's sister, I take it." Flitwick looked at the girl, a kindly smile on his face. "Yes, Professor." Luna nodded. "Eris is an extraordinary student, the finest I've taught in all my years." Flitwick's eyes shone at the mention of Eris. "I hope you'll study hard too, Luna, and grow as fine a wizard as your brother." "I will, Professor." Luna nodded firmly. And Luna didn't disappoint him. In that first charms lesson, though she couldn't yet cast the levitation charm perfectly, she picked it up faster than any of the other first years, plainly a girl of real talent. Flitwick was delighted, and praised her warmly. "Splendid, Luna. You've a real gift for charms." Flitwick beamed. "It seems talent runs in your family. Both you and your brother, remarkable students, the pair of you." Luna flushed a little at the praise, but the joy on her face was plain. She knew she still had a long way to go to match Eris, but she was determined to work hard, and one day be as fine a wizard as her brother. Meanwhile, in his own class, Eris went about his day as steadily as ever, sitting through the lesson, and, of course, never forgetting to farm his 3 daily quests off the professor. At the end of the day's lessons, Eris went to find Luna, to hear how her first day had gone. "Big brother. Professor Flitwick praised me, he said I've a gift for charms." The moment she saw Eris, Luna ran to him, her face bright with a joy she couldn't contain. "Well done." Eris smiled and stroked her hair. "I knew you'd do well. But I'm still a long way from you, big brother." Luna looked up at him, a flicker of determination in her eyes. "I'll work hard, though, and one day I'll be as good as you." I believe you." Eris smiled and nodded. He knew Luna had real talent, with hard work, she'd surely grow into a fine wizard. Over the days that followed, Luna settled into life at Hogwarts. She was a diligent student, and quick besides. In every class, she stood out among the first years, and won no end of praise from the professors. And of course, whenever she met with something she couldn't grasp, she'd come to Eris, who'd always explain it to her patiently, and teach her a little extra magic besides. Under Eris's tutelage, Luna's magic came on quickly. Before long, she could cast a good many first-year spells, and even a few beyond her year, that most first-years couldn't manage at all. The professors were astonished, and their praise for her grew warmer still. In their eyes, this pair of Ravenclaw siblings were both extraordinary students, their futures certain to be bright. It seems the professors have taken to Luna as well, Eris thought, a quiet pleasure stirring in him. He was glad to see Luna doing so well, glad, too, that she'd found her place at Hogwarts, and grown so quickly. It was exactly what he'd hoped for. Naturally, Eris didn't neglect his own studies and research either. His days went on as busily as ever, meditating each morning, farming his quests in class, and shutting himself away in his free hours to study time and space magic and press on with his research into the magic array. His strength climbed steadily. And his research into the magic array had reached a crucial stage. He was working now to inscribe the array onto a wand, and to make it hold several spells at once. It was slow, painstaking work, and setbacks were many, but he never once thought of giving up. He knew that once he cracked it, that auto-casting wand of his would, at last, be real. And so, with Luna at his side, and his studies and research pressing steadily on, Eris's second year at Hogwarts settled into its rhythm, livelier by far, and happier, than the last. But Eris knew well enough that this year would not pass entirely without incident. For he remembered that in the original story, the second year at Hogwarts was the year of the Chamber of Secrets, the year the monster within it was loosed, and the school thrown into no small danger. The Chamber of Secrets, Eris thought, his gaze turning thoughtful. It seems this year won't be a quiet one after all. Back in his dormitory that night, Eris turned the matter of the Chamber of Secrets over in his mind. He remembered the story of it well. The Chamber of Secrets had been built, long ago, by Salazar Slytherin, one of Hogwarts' 4 founders. Within it, Slytherin had sealed a monster, a basilisk, a great serpent whose gaze could kill. Slytherin had meant the chamber to be opened, one day, by his own heir, and the basilisk loosed, to purge the school of all its muggle-born students. And in the original story, the heir who opened the chamber, in Eris's second year, was Ginny Weasley, Ronald's little sister, a first year that year. Though it wasn't truly Ginny's own doing, she'd been possessed. The one behind it all was a diary, the diary of Tom Riddle, which held within it a fragment of the young Voldemort's soul. Ginny, coming upon the diary, had been slowly ensnared by it, until at last it possessed her, and used her to open the chamber, and loose the basilisk to attack the muggle-born students. So this year, the Chamber of Secrets will be opened, and the basilisk loosed, Eris thought, his gaze turning grave. He knew that in the original story, though the basilisk had petrified several students, none had died, and that in the end, Harry had gone down into the chamber, slain the basilisk, and destroyed the diary, saving Ginny. But after the divergence at the end of last year, Eris could no longer take it for granted that the plot would hold to its course. He'd have to watch this affair all the more closely. The key to it all is the diary, Eris thought, his mind turning quickly. If I could deal with the diary before it possesses Ginny, then this whole crisis might be averted before it begins. But he soon set the notion aside. He didn't know, yet, exactly when or how the diary had come into Ginny's hands, and if he moved rashly, he might do more harm than good. Better to watch quietly for now, and wait for the right moment to act. He recalled that in the original story, it was Lucius Malfoy who'd slipped the diary to Ginny, quietly tucking it among her things in flourish and blots, when the Weasleys and the Malfoys had crossed paths there before term. If that were so, then the diary was likely already in Ginny's hands. I'll have Iris keep an eye on Ginny, Eris thought, his gaze turning thoughtful. Through the little dragon's eyes, he could watch for any sign of the diary's influence, and, when the moment came, be ready to act. Though he judged that in the end the crisis would be resolved, it did no harm to be careful, least of all after last year's divergence. With that, he sent word to Iris through their bond, bidding the little dragon watch Ginny Weasley closely, and mark, especially, whether the girl carried an old diary, and how she behaved. Over the days that followed, Iris kept her quiet watch on Ginny. And through the little dragon's eyes, Eris saw that Ginny did indeed carry an old diary, one she'd write in, now and then, when she was alone. Sometimes, as she wrote, her expression would turn strange, almost trance-like, as though something were quietly working upon her mind. So the diary really is already in Ginny's hands, Eris thought, his gaze sharpening. And it's begun, slowly, to work its influence on her. Which meant the crisis of the Chamber of Secrets was drawing near. He gave a moment's thought to stepping in, to finding some way to take the diary from Ginny, and destroy it, before it could possess her fully. But he soon set the thought aside again. The diary held a fragment of Voldemort's soul, to destroy it was no simple matter. In the original story, it had taken a basilisk fang to do it, an object of formidable, destroying power. Eris, with his present strength, might not be able to destroy it outright. And if he moved rashly, and failed, he might well tip his own hand, and bring troubles of his own down upon himself. Better to wait, Eris thought, his gaze turning deep. I'll keep watching through Iris's eyes, and when the moment's right, I'll act. For now, he need only bide his time, and go on growing stronger. When the crisis of the chamber truly came, he'd be ready to meet it. Still, one thing gave him pause. He recalled that in the original story, the basilisk had petrified several students, and among them, Hermione. Though she'd been restored in the end, by a mandrake restorative draft, Eris had no wish to see his friend come to harm. I'll have Iris keep an eye on Hermione too, Eris thought. And when the basilisk moves against her, I'll step in. Whatever else held to the story's course, he'd not stand by and let a friend be hurt. The moment the merchants saw the paper and pens arranged on the counter, they immediately became excited and started calling out the quantities they wanted. 50 of those. I'll take 100. 100 for me too. Orders came one after another. Jason Liu barely had time to catch his breath as he counted pens, refills, and sheets of paper for each merchant. By the end of the afternoon, every gel pen and refill he had brought over had been sold. Only around 2,000 sheets of A4 paper remained. Jason rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It seemed the A4 paper really was a little too expensive. Of course, the fact that there were no pens left probably also affected sales. There wasn't much point in buying large amounts of paper if there was nothing convenient to write with. Jason was already considering lowering the price. Even so, several merchants still bought some white paper before leaving. Just as everyone was preparing to head out, Jason suddenly remembered the other product he had prepared. He quickly brought out 100 bars of soap. Hold on, everyone. I've still got one more item from the Far East. I guarantee you'll like this. The merchants who had been about to leave immediately stopped. After seeing how useful Jason's other products were, anything he called a product from the Far East was enough to grab their attention. Jason placed a basin of water on the counter and picked up a bar of soap. This is called soap, he explained. You can use it to wash clothes, clean your hands and face, or even use it when bathing. Grease, dirt, oil, all of it comes off much more easily with this. He handed the soap to a nearby merchant. Try it. The man looked curious but followed Jason's instructions. He wet his hands, rubbed the soap between them, and began washing. A few moments later, the water in the basin had turned noticeably dark. The merchant stared at his hands in surprise. The thick layer of oil and dirt that had covered them was almost completely gone. He raised his hands to his nose and sniffed. Amazing. Not only is the grease gone, but my hands even smell nice. Jason nearly laughed. Nice? The man was probably smelling the artificial fragrance from the soap. Still, compared to the sour mixture of sweat, grease, and dirt that had been on his hands before, the smell of soap probably did seem wonderful. Jason then brought over a dirty piece of clothing and demonstrated how the soap worked on fabric. The difference was even more obvious. The stains came out far more easily than they would with the primitive cleaning materials commonly used in Westeros. The merchants immediately became interested. How much does one cost? This time, Jason had already decided on a price. 50 copper stars per bar. For ordinary commoners, 50 copper stars was definitely expensive. But Jason wasn't really targeting ordinary people. For wealthy merchants, nobles, and powerful families, the price was nothing. As expected, the soap sold quickly. In barely any time at all 100 bars were gone. Jason finally raised his hands. That's everything for today. Sold out. The merchants seemed satisfied as they gathered up their purchases and left one after another. Once the last person was gone, Jason shut the door. Then came his favorite part. Counting the money. He sat down and began going through the coins he had earned that afternoon. At first, he was only casually calculating. But as the total became clearer, his expression slowly changed. 3,000 silver stags. Jason stared at the number again to make sure he hadn't made a mistake. 3,000. Converted according to Westeros currency, that was 23 gold dragons and 700 silver stags. After including the money he already had and subtracting the 220 silver stags he had spent buying the house, along with the 3 silver stags he had paid Old Roads, Jason now had a total of 26 gold dragons and 907 silver stags. 26 gold dragons. Jason picked up one of the heavy coins. Even if he only calculated their value as raw gold, 26 coins should contain at least around 780 grams of gold. At roughly 310 yuan per gram, that would already be worth about 241,800 yuan. More than 240,000 yuan. In one day. Jason sat there in silence. Then his eyes widened. Over 200,000 in one day. Even though he had known the business would be profitable, seeing the actual number was completely different. His heart started pounding. Without wasting any more time, Jason gathered the gold dragons and silver stags and activated his ability. The room around him disappeared. A moment later, he was back inside his rented apartment in the modern world. Right now, Jason had only one thought. Sell the gold. Coins were valuable, but money sitting safely in his bank account would make him feel much more secure. He quickly packed the 26 gold dragons, ran downstairs, jumped onto his little electric scooter, and sped toward Hungry Gold Store. Boss Wong was currently the only person Jason knew who could safely buy his gold. They had already completed one transaction the day before, so at least some basic trust had been established. Jason also didn't want to keep changing gold buyers. If he suddenly started selling unusual gold coins to different stores all over the city, someone might eventually become suspicious. That was unnecessary trouble. So he went straight back to Boss Wong. When Jason entered the office and placed 26 gold dragon coins on the desk, Boss Wong's chubby face froze. He stared at the coins. Then he stared at Jason. He had clearly underestimated this young man. Yesterday, Jason had only sold a small amount of gold. Today, he had suddenly brought in 26 full gold coins. And they weren't ordinary gold pieces either. Boss Wong picked one up and examined it carefully. After turning it over several times, he suddenly frowned in recognition. Wait, isn't this a golden dragon coin from that American fantasy TV series that became popular a while back? Jason remained calm. Yeah. I bought them from a friend. They're specially made commemorative coins. The lie came out smoothly. Boss Wong nodded. There was absolutely no way he could imagine that Jason had personally carried these coins back from the actual world of Westeros. Boss Wong continued examining them. The craftsmanship is a little rough, but among fans of the series, these should have some collectible value. He picked up another coin. Jason watched him for a moment before asking, "Boss Wang, since these are collectible coins, you're not planning to buy them at ordinary scrap gold prices, right?" The moment business was mentioned, Boss Wang's familiar friendly smile returned. "Since Brother Lu brought it up, I'll be straightforward with you." Jason waited. Boss Wang cleared his throat. "First of all, I don't specialize in collectibles. So their collector value isn't very useful to me." Jason said nothing. Boss Wang continued. "But since you've already done business with me before, I'll give you a good deal. I'll buy these golden dragon coins based directly on pure gold weight. I won't make deductions because of the craftsmanship." He smiled. "What do you think?" Jason almost laughed. "Collector value isn't useful to you? Then why were you examining every coin so carefully? And what was all this talk about doing him a favor because they had done business before? They had met once. What friendship?" Still, Jason didn't argue about that part. He didn't have another reliable buyer, and finding new buyers every time he wanted to sell gold could eventually bring unwanted attention. Jason named his price. 330 yuan per gram. Boss Wang immediately shook his head. "No way." And just like that, the bargaining began. 330. 310. 325. 315. The two went back and forth for quite a while. Finally, they settled on 320 yuan per gram. Jason knew Boss Wang would still make money from the deal, but he didn't care too much. His cost for obtaining these gold dragons was practically nothing compared to their modern value. More importantly, once his business expanded, he would probably have plenty of opportunities to bring back more gold. The 26 golden dragon coins were weighed. Total weight, 908.71 grams. At 320 yuan per gram, the value came to 290,787.2 yuan. Boss Wang looked at the number and smiled. "Let's make it 291,000. Jason nodded. "Deal." The payment was transferred directly to his bank account. A short while later, Jason's phone vibrated. He opened the banking notification. The money had arrived. Jason checked his balance. 300,000 yuan. He stared at the screen. 300,000. Not long ago, that kind of money had seemed incredibly far away. Now it was sitting in his account. After completing the deal, Boss Wang became noticeably warmer toward him. The two exchanged phone numbers and added each other on WeChat so they could contact each other directly in the future. Jason then left the store in an excellent mood. He climbed back onto his little electric scooter and rode home, feeling as if even the wind had become more pleasant. But once he returned to his apartment, he didn't immediately celebrate. Instead, he began thinking about the next shipment. The gel pens were completely sold out. He needed another batch. Only around 5,000 refills remained. Those needed to be restocked too. He still had about 7,000 sheets of A4 paper, but since he planned to lower the selling price, buying another 10,000 sheets wouldn't hurt. As for soap, he still had some stock on hand. He could sell what remained before ordering more. Jason contacted the suppliers again. This time, his order was much larger. 10,000 gel pens. At 0.5 yuan each, that came to 5,000 yuan. 100,000 refills. At 0.05 yuan each, another 5,000 yuan. 10,000 sheets of A4 paper. At 0.05 yuan per sheet, only 500 yuan. Total cost. 10,500 yuan. Jason looked at the figure on his phone. 10,500 yuan. That was all he needed to spend. But if he transported those goods to Westeros and sold them at his current prices, the return could easily exceed 100 times his investment. More than 1 million yuan. Possibly several million. Jason slowly smiled. If everything continued going this smoothly, making his first million wouldn't take long at all. The moment the merchants saw the paper and pens laid out on the counter, their eyes lit up. They immediately began shouting out the quantities they wanted. 50 of these. I'll take 100. Give me another 50. Jason Liu could only wipe the sweat from his forehead as order after order came in. Pens and paper again. By the end of the afternoon, every gel pen and refill Jason had brought over had been sold. Only about 2,000 sheets of A4 paper remained. It seemed the paper really was a little too expensive. Of course, another reason was that there were no pens left to sell with it. Jason was already considering lowering the price of A4 paper. Most of the merchants had bought what they wanted, though a few still purchased some white paper even after hearing that the gel pens were sold out. Just as everyone was preparing to leave, Jason suddenly brought out the 100 bars of soap he had prepared earlier. Wait a second, everyone. I still have one more product from the Far East. I'm pretty sure you're going to like this. The merchants immediately stopped. Their curiosity had already been stirred by the strange products Jason had sold them earlier, so they quickly gathered around again. Jason placed a basin of water on the counter and held up a bar of soap. This is called soap. You can use it to wash clothes, clean your hands and face, or even bathe with it. Whether it's grease, dirt, or oil, rub a little soap on it and it'll come right off. To demonstrate, Jason handed the soap to one of the merchants standing nearby. The man washed his hands in the basin. Within moments, the water had turned visibly dirty, while his hands looked far cleaner than before. The merchant raised his hands to his nose and sniffed them. His eyes widened. Amazing! Not only is all the grease gone, but my hands even smell good. Jason's mouth twitched slightly. Smell good? That was probably just the chemical fragrance from the soap. Still, compared to the mixture of sweat, dirt, and oil that had been clinging to the merchant's hands earlier, the smell of soap probably did seem incredibly pleasant. Jason then demonstrated how well the soap worked on dirty clothing. The result was obvious. It cleaned far better than the primitive cleaning materials commonly used in Westeros. The merchants immediately became interested. How much? Jason had already thought about the price. 50 copper stars per bar. For an ordinary commoner, that price was extremely expensive. But for wealthy merchants, nobles, and powerful families, 50 copper stars was nothing. As expected, the merchants barely hesitated. All 100 bars of soap were sold in no time. After announcing that everything for the day had officially sold out, Jason watched as the merchants happily carried away their purchases. Once the last customer left, he closed the door and began counting his earnings. At first, Jason didn't think much of it. But when he finished calculating the total, he froze. 3,000 silver stags. That was equivalent to 23 gold dragons and 700 silver stags. Adding the money he already had, while subtracting the 220 silver stags he had spent buying the house and the 3 silver stags he had paid Old Roads, Jason now possessed a total of 26 gold dragons and 907 silver stags. Jason stared at the coins in front of him. Just the 26 gold dragons alone contained at least several hundred grams of gold. At a modern market price of roughly 310 yuan per gram, they were worth well over 200,000 yuan. More than 200,000 yuan in a single day. Jason swallowed hard. Even though he had already expected his cross-world trading business to be profitable, seeing the actual numbers still left him stunned. His excitement quickly overwhelmed him. Without wasting another second, Jason gathered all the gold dragons and silver stags and activated his ability. The scenery around him changed. In the next moment, he was back inside his rented apartment in the modern world. Jason had only one thought now. Sell the gold. As long as the money was safely sitting in his bank account, he could finally relax. He stuffed the 26 gold dragon coins into a bag, jumped onto his little electric scooter, and sped toward Boss Wong's Henley Gold store. Boss Wong was currently the only gold buyer Jason trusted. They had already completed one transaction the previous day, which meant at least a basic level of trust had been established. More importantly, Jason didn't want to keep changing buyers. Selling large amounts of unusual gold coins to different people could easily attract unwanted attention. When Jason entered Boss Wong's office again and placed 26 gold dragon coins on the desk, the man's round face immediately filled with surprise. He had underestimated this young man. Yesterday, Jason had only sold a small amount of gold. Today, he had suddenly brought in 26 entire gold coins. And these weren't ordinary chunks of gold either. They looked like collectible fantasy coins. Boss Wong picked one up and examined it carefully. After turning it over a few times, he suddenly asked, "Aren't these the golden dragon coins from that American fantasy TV series that became popular a while back?" Jason nodded immediately. "Yeah. I bought them from a friend. They're commemorative coins specially made for collectors." He lied without hesitation. Boss Wong nodded thoughtfully. Even if he spent all day guessing, he would never imagine that Jason had literally brought the coins back from another world. "The craftsmanship is a little rough," Boss Wong said while examining another coin, "but among fans of the series, they probably have some collectible value." Jason leaned forward slightly. "So, Boss Wong, how much can you give me for them? You're not going to calculate everything purely based on the gold weight, right?" Boss Wong smiled. "Since Brother Liu has already said that, then I'll give you a straightforward price." Jason waited. Boss Wong cleared his throat. "To be honest, I'm not really in the collectibles business, so the collector value doesn't mean much to me. But since you've already done business with me before, I'll make you an offer." He placed the coin back on the desk. "I'll buy the golden dragon coins according to the price of pure gold, without deducting anything for impurities." Boss Wong smiled. "What do you think?" Jason almost rolled his eyes. Collector value doesn't mean anything. Then why was he willing to buy the coins whole instead of melting them immediately? And what was this nonsense about friendship? They had only met yesterday. Still, Jason understood that Boss Wong was a businessman. Of course he wanted to make money. Jason also didn't have another reliable sales channel at the moment, and constantly searching for new gold buyers carried unnecessary risks. So the two began bargaining. Boss Wong initially offered 330 yuan per gram, but after going back and forth for quite some time, they eventually settled on 320 yuan per gram. Jason knew he probably wasn't getting the absolute best price possible, but he didn't care too much. Once his business became larger, there would be plenty of opportunities to sell more gold dragons. The 26 coins weighed a total of 908.71 grams. At 320 yuan per gram, that came to 290,787.2 yuan. Boss Wong rounded the amount up. 291,000 yuan. Deal. The money was transferred directly to Jason's bank account. A short while later, the notification arrived on his phone. Jason checked his balance. 300,000 yuan. He stared at the number for several seconds. Yesterday, he had still been worrying about money. Now he had 300,000 yuan sitting in his bank account. Boss Wong was far friendlier after the deal. The two exchanged phone numbers and added each other on WeChat, making future transactions much easier. Jason left the gold shop in an excellent mood. He climbed onto his little electric scooter and rode home with a grin on his face. But he had no intention of relaxing yet. The gel pens had sold out completely. He needed more. Most of the refills had also been sold, leaving only around 5,000. He needed a much larger batch. There were still around 7,000 sheets of A4 paper left, but Jason planned to lower the selling price slightly. Even so, he decided to buy another 10,000 sheets. As for the soap, he still had some stock left, so there was no need to buy more immediately. Once he returned home, Jason contacted his suppliers. His next order was much larger than the previous one. 10,000 gel pens. At 0.5 yuan each, that was 5,000 yuan. 100,000 refills. At 0.05 yuan each, another 5,000 yuan. 10,000 sheets of A4 paper. At 0.05 yuan each, just 500 yuan. Total cost, 10,500 yuan. Jason looked at the numbers and smiled. 10,500 yuan in cost. Yet if he managed to sell everything in Westeros at his current prices, the profit could easily exceed 100 times his investment. Millions. Jason leaned back in his chair, his heartbeat speeding up. If everything went according to plan, he could make his first million very soon. Indifferent pig, boss, ask for a bag of sheep. It can be hit, it can endure, but it definitely can't be clingy. // wink / // wink / Luo Luo Gu, the big boss has appeared. Octopus boss, truly a big boss. The chat below instantly filled with flattery. Live streaming had developed so much that attractive female streamers were everywhere now. Most viewers had already become numb to pretty faces, so getting large donations wasn't easy. But someone had just dropped 5,000 yuan in one go. Of course the entire live stream room immediately started treating him like royalty. 24K single dog, Sister Chi-Chi, I'll come watch you dance next time. I'm heading off to sleep. When Chi-Chi saw that one of her biggest supporters was leaving, her smile became even sweeter. Okay, brother single dog. Chi-Chi will be waiting for you next time. Get some rest and sleep well. Satisfied, Jason Liu closed the live stream app and put down his phone. He had actual business to handle tomorrow, so staying up late watching streamers wasn't worth it. As for the guy who had been mocking him in the chat, Jason couldn't care less. He was a grown man. Why would he waste time arguing with some random idiot on the internet? Back in the live stream room, Liang Ziejia stared at the screen as 24K single dog completely ignored him and went offline. He immediately became annoyed. He had already thrown down the challenge, and the guy just left. What kind of move was that? Young people these days really had no sense of honor. The next morning, Jason got up early, ate breakfast, and got into the real estate agent's car. Today, he was finally going to inspect the warehouse. While sitting in the passenger seat, Jason started thinking about another problem. He really needed a car. Living in such a large city without one was inconvenient, especially now that he had to keep moving goods around. Still, if he was going to buy a car, he didn't want some cheap temporary option. Once his business grew, he would probably be worth tens of millions anyway. Jason sighed inwardly. He was still too poor. Make money. That was the priority. After driving for a little over half an hour, the car finally stopped near an abandoned factory complex beside the outer ring road of the high-tech zone. The agent drove through an entrance where the old gate had already been removed, then stopped in front of a large warehouse that had been converted from one of the original factory workshops. Mr. Liu, we're here. The agent got out, pulled out a key, and opened the warehouse door. Come inside and take a look. Jason followed him in. The warehouse was much larger than he had expected. According to the agent, it covered around 500 square meters. It had previously been rented by an express delivery company and used as a temporary transfer station. However, the company had recently built a new automated warehousing and logistics center in Jing City, so they no longer needed this location. A few pieces of discarded shipping paper and packaging material were still scattered across the floor. Jason walked around slowly, checking everything carefully. The roof looked solid. There were no obvious leaks. The interior space was open enough for vehicles and large shipments. Most importantly, it was more than enough for storing the goods he planned to transport to Westeros. Jason was satisfied. He didn't feel like wasting another few days searching for something slightly cheaper. How much is the rent? The agent's eyes immediately brightened. He could tell Jason was interested. Mr. Liu, the rent is 20,000 yuan per month. However, the minimum lease is 6 months. If you cancel early, the remaining rent won't be refunded. After explaining everything, the agent watched Jason carefully. This warehouse had been sitting on their company's listings for months. They had been trying to get rid of it for quite a while, so he definitely didn't want to scare Jason away with an unreasonable price. Jason quietly calculated the cost. 20,000 yuan a month for a 500 square meter warehouse in the suburban area of a major city wasn't particularly expensive. More importantly, he could afford it. All right. I'll take it. The agent almost smiled from ear to ear. That's great, Mr. Liu. We can head back to the office and sign the contract right away. Closing the warehouse deal meant a decent commission for him. But before they left, Jason suddenly asked, "Are there any good residential areas nearby? Somewhere with a nicer environment?" Jason wanted to live closer to the warehouse. If he lived nearby, it would be much easier to move goods into the warehouse and then transport them to Westeros whenever needed. The agent paused. A nicer residential area? This place was already outside the Third Ring Road. There weren't many high-end apartment complexes nearby. However, he suddenly thought of something. "Mr. Liu, there aren't many upscale high-rise communities around here, but there is a villa community nearby. The environment is very good, and our company happens to have several villas available for rent." A villa? Jason was slightly surprised. Originally, he had only planned to rent a larger apartment, maybe something with 3 bedrooms and a living room. He had never seriously considered renting an entire villa. But now that the agent mentioned it, why not? The warehouse would cost 120,000 yuan for 6 months. Even after paying that, Jason would still have around 200,000 yuan left. And considering how much money he could earn from Westeros every day, renting a villa wasn't really a financial burden anymore. At this rate, even buying a villa might not be that far away. Jason immediately made his decision. "Sure. Let's take a look." The agent nearly couldn't believe his luck. He had expected to close 1 deal today. Now there might be 2. His face immediately brightened, and his attitude became even more enthusiastic. "Of course, Mr. Liu. I'll take you to the Forest Peninsula Villa community nearby. I'll also call one of my colleagues and have them bring the contract directly over." Jason nodded. He was quite satisfied with the service. They got back into the car, turned onto another road, and drove for less than 10 minutes before arriving at Forest Peninsula. After registering at the security gate, the agent drove Jason inside. Jason looked out the window as they moved through the neighborhood. Large trees lined both sides of the road, casting shade over the sidewalks. The landscaping was neat and carefully maintained. There was a golf course, a clear artificial lake, freshly trimmed lawns, and plenty of open green space. Even the air seemed cleaner than downtown. Jason couldn't help but smile. So this was how rich people lived. The car eventually stopped outside Villa number 7. Before Jason could even open the door himself, another agent who had been waiting outside hurried forward and opened it for him. "Mr. Liu, welcome." The overly attentive treatment made Jason feel slightly awkward. He still wasn't completely used to being treated like a wealthy client. "Mr. Liu, please come inside." The agents led him through the villa and showed him each room. Villa number 7 covered around 512 square meters and had 3 floors. There were 9 rooms and 3 living areas, along with a private home theater and gym. The first floor had a large living room, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, laundry area, and garage. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, another spacious living room, and a balcony. The third floor had 2 more bedrooms and access to a rooftop swimming pool. The entire villa was decorated in a Western style. The furniture and appliances were already included. Jason wouldn't need to renovate or buy anything major. He could move in immediately. After finishing the tour, Jason returned to the living room and sat down on the sofa. The agent stood nearby with a stack of contracts in his hands. "Mr. Liu, what do you think of Villa number 7? Jason looked around the luxurious living room one more time. He liked it. "If the rent is reasonable, I'll take this one." The agent immediately understood what Jason meant. "Don't overcharge me." He had originally been considering quoting a slightly higher price, but after hearing that sentence, he changed his mind. Jason was already renting the warehouse. If he also rented the villa, the agent would earn commissions from both deals. There was no reason to risk losing such a valuable customer over a little extra profit. After quickly calculating everything in his head, the agent gave him a more reasonable offer. 25,000 yuan per month. 1 month's deposit and 3 months' rent paid up front. He looked at Jason seriously. "Mr. Liu, that's already the lowest price I can offer for this villa." Jason leaned back against the sofa and looked around the room again. Jason Liu completely ignored the agent's so-called lowest price and looked around the living room again. He really liked the villa's interior. Of course he did. Compared to the tiny apartment he had been living in, this place was on another level entirely. It was bigger, cleaner, quieter, and probably 100 times more comfortable. "All right. I'll take it." Jason didn't bother negotiating any further. The agent was stunned for a second. This was the first time he had dealt with a client who made decisions this quickly. He immediately pulled out the warehouse lease agreement, while his colleague brought over the villa rental contract. Jason signed both. Then he paid. A total of 220,000 yuan disappeared from his bank account. Just like that, he had secured the warehouse for 6 months and the villa for 3 months. The agent was practically glowing. The commission from these 2 deals was going to be excellent. Wanting to build a good relationship with such an easygoing and wealthy customer, he quickly offered another service. "Mr. Liu, I can contact a cleaning company and have the entire villa cleaned for you. No charge." Jason naturally had no reason to refuse. "Sure. Thanks." After everything was settled, the agent drove him back to his old apartment complex. Jason went upstairs, packed a few sets of clothes, then called the landlord and told him he was moving out. The landlord returned 1 month's deposit but refused to refund the remaining month's rent. Jason didn't care. Compared to the money he was making now, that amount barely mattered. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, went downstairs, and climbed onto the little electric scooter that had been with him for more than 2 years. Then he headed toward Forest Peninsula. Even without much traffic, the trip took him more than an hour. By the time Jason arrived, security had already been informed that he was now a resident. There was no need to register again. He simply rode straight inside. When he reached Villa No. 7, the cleaning company had already sent workers over. Several people were busy cleaning the floors, windows, bathrooms, and furniture. Jason dropped off his backpack, then took a taxi back into the city. He bought a brand new quilt, pillows, bed sheets, and a few basic personal items. As for kitchen supplies, he skipped them. Jason didn't know how to cook anyway. There was no point buying an entire set of cookware just for decoration. Takeout was more than enough. By the time he returned, the cleaning company had finished. The workers packed up their equipment and left. For the first time, Jason was completely alone inside the villa. He sat down in the spacious living room and slowly looked around. The large sofa. The polished floors. The expensive-looking furniture. The wide windows. The quiet surroundings. For a while, Jason simply sat there in silence. Not long ago, he had been working hard just to save enough money for a down payment on a small apartment and maybe buy a decent car. Back then, both things had seemed far away. Now, they were within reach. Maybe even easy. Jason smiled. He knew exactly where all of this had come from. Westeros. As long as he continued developing his trade between the two worlds, his life would only keep getting better. Feeling energized again, Jason grabbed a simple lunch, packed his backpack, and activated his ability. The modern villa disappeared. A moment later, he was back inside his house in the winter market town of Westeros. There was work to do. Jason moved his remaining inventory down to the shop on the first floor. Around 800 bars of ordinary soap. Another 100 bars from a different batch. And roughly 7,000 sheets of A4 paper. He planned to continue selling everything that afternoon. The A4 paper had not sold particularly well at 10 copper stars per sheet. The reason was obvious. It was too expensive. Jason thought about it for a moment. 5 copper stars should be better. Paper should be treated as a high-volume product, not a luxury item. Even at 5 copper stars per sheet, the profit margin was still absurd. He was earning close to 100 times the original cost. There was no reason to be greedy. Soap was different. His previous batch had sold for 50 copper stars each. This time, Jason planned to increase the price to 1 silver stag per bar. The main customers for soap were nobles, merchants, and wealthy households anyway. If they wanted a rare product from the Far East, then naturally they could pay a premium for it. Jason was still arranging goods inside the shop when he suddenly heard something next door. A baby crying. Not normal crying. It was weak, rough, and painful. Then came the sound of a woman sobbing. Several voices followed, low and chaotic. Jason stopped what he was doing. At first, he tried to ignore it. Whatever was happening next door had nothing to do with him. But the baby continued crying. The sound became increasingly hoarse. The woman's sobbing grew louder. Jason frowned. He couldn't focus anymore. Curiosity mixed with an uncomfortable feeling in his chest. Finally, he stepped outside. A large group of people had gathered in front of the neighboring house. Jason initially thought they were simply watching out of curiosity. But when he got closer, he realized that wasn't the case. These were local residents. Men and women from the winter market town. Almost everyone wore the same heavy expression. Some women were quietly wiping away tears. Several men stood silently with helpless looks on their faces. Jason's expression became serious. When the crowd noticed him approaching, they quickly moved aside. By now, most people in the area knew him as the mysterious merchant from the Far East. Jason walked through the opening and entered the house. The scene inside immediately explained everything. A pale woman sat near the center of the room. She was holding a baby tightly in her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she gently rubbed the child's back with her rough, reddened hands. The baby's face was unnaturally flushed. Its tiny body felt visibly weak. The crying had already become hoarse, almost as though something was blocking its throat. Nearby stood a boy who looked around 5 or 6 years old. He clung tightly to a young girl beside him. His dirty little face was filled with fear. His wide brown eyes moved between his mother and the sick baby, clearly unable to understand what was happening. The girl beside him wore patched, greasy clothes made from coarse cloth. Soot covered parts of her face, probably from helping around a kitchen or fireplace. She was crying too. She hugged the boy tightly while staring at the baby in their mother's arms. The entire room felt heavy. No one knew what to say. Old Rhodes finally spoke. His wrinkled face carried an expression of deep sadness. "Martha, you have to accept it." He looked toward the baby. Even Maester Lewin couldn't help her. Perhaps this is simply the will of the old gods. Martha shook her head while crying. Old Rhodes continued gently. Give the poor child some milk of the poppy. At least then she won't suffer so much. Jason's expression changed. From the quiet conversations around him, he quickly pieced together what had happened. The woman was named Martha. She served as the wet nurse of young Rickon Stark at Winterfell. Her baby daughter had been sick for several days. The child had developed a high fever and wouldn't stop crying. Her body had become dangerously hot. Desperate, Martha had gone to Winterfell and begged Maester Luwin for help. The Maester had examined the child and prepared medicine. But it hadn't worked. Instead, the baby's condition had continued to worsen. And in Westeros, if even a trained Maester couldn't cure an illness, ordinary people had almost no other options. There were no modern hospitals. No antibiotics. No proper testing. No advanced medicine. For everyone standing in this room, the baby's death already seemed inevitable. All Martha could do was hold her daughter and wait. Jason looked at the crying child. His mood became complicated. Until now, he had mostly treated Westeros as a business opportunity. A place where cheap modern products could be exchanged for enormous amounts of wealth. He had never felt particularly connected to the people here. But this was different. That baby was suffering right in front of him. A living child. Jason couldn't simply watch and do nothing. He hesitated. Then gritted his teeth. Maybe he could help. He stepped forward. Old Rhodes noticed him and looked surprised. Lord East. Why are you here? Jason glanced at him, then looked back at Martha and the baby. He hesitated for another moment before speaking. Well, there's something I haven't mentioned before. Everyone nearby turned toward him. Jason continued carefully. The Far East doesn't only have strange goods. He pointed toward the sick child. We also have medicine. Old Rhodes stared at him. Jason took a breath. I can't promise anything. But I might have something that could help this little girl. For a moment, the room went completely silent. Then Old Rhodes' eyes widened. His already red nose seemed to become even brighter as excitement appeared on his face. Lord East. He stepped closer. Are you telling the truth? Thump. The moment Martha heard Jason lose words, she dropped to her knees with the baby still in her arms. Tears streamed down her face. My lord, please have mercy. Please save my poor child. I'm begging you, please. The young girl beside her immediately pulled the little boy down with her. She looked up at Jason with tear-filled brown eyes. My lord, please save Lillian. In the name of the old gods and the new, if you can keep her alive, I swear I'll serve you and your family for the rest of my life. Please, my lord. The girl had heard plenty about Jason over the past 2 days. Everyone in the area knew that a mysterious nobleman from the Far East had bought the house next to theirs. But this was the first time she had actually seen him. Hey, don't kneel. Please, get up. Jason immediately became uncomfortable. He wanted to reach down and help them, but hesitated, unsure of the local customs. Instead, he quickly explained, I said I can try. I have medicine that might help her, but I can't promise it will definitely work. He looked directly at Martha. If you agree, I'll do what I can. Jason wanted to make one thing clear from the beginning. He wasn't claiming that he could definitely cure the child. He could only try. Before Martha could even answer, Old Rhodes spoke excitedly. If you have a way, then please try it. May the old gods bless us. Perhaps the medicine from your homeland really can save poor Lillian. Martha nodded desperately. Please, please try anything. I can't just sit here and watch my daughter suffer until she dies. For a mother who had already lost all hope, even the smallest possibility was enough. All right. Let me look at her first. Jason didn't immediately run back for his medicine. Instead, he approached the baby. Lillian's eyes were closed. Her face was bright red, her skin felt hot, and even her crying had grown weaker. Jason carefully touched her forehead. The heat shocked him. Her temperature was frighteningly high. He didn't know exactly what illness she had, but he knew one thing. They couldn't keep waiting. I'm going to get my medicine. Jason hurried out of the house and ran back upstairs to his own place. A few moments later, he returned carrying the entire backpack of medical supplies he had brought from the modern world. Put her on the bed. Martha quickly obeyed. Jason took out the supplies he had prepared and tried to cool the child down first. The young girl stayed beside Martha and helped wherever she could. Jason then turned his attention to the medicine. He wasn't a doctor. In fact, his knowledge of medicine was extremely limited. But right now, there was nobody else who could help. Maester Lewin had already tried and failed. Jason could only rely on the modern medicine and basic information he had prepared beforehand. Everyone inside the room watched him silently. Their eyes followed every unfamiliar object he pulled from his backpack. To them, the syringes, sealed medicine containers, alcohol, and gauze looked almost like strange magical tools. Jason carefully prepared the medicine. Before giving Lillian the full treatment, he first performed a small test to check whether she showed any immediate reaction. Then he waited. The room became so quiet that even the child's weak breathing could be heard. 10 minutes passed. There was no obvious allergic reaction. Jason finally relaxed slightly. He carefully administered a small amount of the medicine. He didn't dare use too much. Lillian was only a baby, and Jason had no professional medical training. All he could do was proceed as cautiously as possible. Afterward, he sealed the remaining supplies as best he could and placed them aside. By modern medical standards, his methods would probably make an actual doctor furious. But this wasn't a modern hospital. This was Westeros. There were no sterile treatment rooms, no advanced equipment, and no trained medical staff standing nearby. Jason could only do the best he could with what he had. When he finished, he found a small stool and sat beside the bed. Now there was nothing left to do but wait. He had no idea whether the medicine would actually work. The room, however, was still packed with people. Everyone wanted to see whether this mysterious nobleman from the Far East could really save a child that even a maester had given up on. Unfortunately, with so many people squeezed together, the air quickly became unbearable. Sweat, dirt, smoke, and countless other smells mixed together. Jason nearly gagged. He immediately frowned. Everyone who doesn't need to be inside, please wait outside. She needs fresh air. Nobody dared argue with him. The crowd slowly left the house, though almost all of them remained gathered around the doorway. Curiosity had completely taken over. Life in the winter market town didn't offer much entertainment. Watching a mysterious foreign nobleman use strange medicines to save a dying baby was naturally something nobody wanted to miss. It seemed that no matter the country, era, or even world, people loved watching something unusual happen. Once the room cleared, the air immediately improved. Jason ignored the few family members who remained inside. They could stay. Then everyone waited. Minutes passed. Slowly, something began to change. Lillian's crying became quieter. But this time, it wasn't because she was losing strength. The painful expression on her tiny face gradually relaxed. Her breathing became steadier. Eventually, she stopped crying completely and drifted into sleep. Jason leaned forward. He carefully touched her forehead again. The heat had clearly gone down. His eyes brightened. It was working. At least for now. He finally released the breath he had been holding. Looks like the medicine is helping. Martha immediately stared at him. Jason gave her an encouraging smile. Her temperature is coming down, and her breathing is much better. If she can make it safely through tonight, her chances should be much better. For a moment, Martha simply stared at him. Then tears poured down her face again. But this time, they were tears of relief. "Thank you, my lord, thank you." She suddenly dropped to her knees again. "You saved my Lillian. I don't even know how I can repay you." The young girl and little boy beside her also looked at Jason with overwhelming gratitude. Jason quickly stood. "Please, get up." He reached down and helped Martha to her feet. "You really don't have to kneel every time. Where I come from, we don't like people kneeling to us." Martha immediately stopped herself. If Lord East didn't like it, she certainly wasn't going to keep doing it. She quickly stood and wiped away her tears. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she hurried deeper into the house. Jason watched curiously. A short while later, Martha returned. In her rough hands was a small collection of silver stags. More than a dozen. Judging by the way she held them, Jason suspected it might be everything she had managed to save. Martha held the coins out toward him. "My lord, please accept this money." The young mother looked embarrassed as she held out the coins. "I know the medicine you used on Lillian must be extremely valuable, my lord. But, this is all the money I have." Jason Liu looked down at the dozen or so silver stags resting in Martha's rough, cracked hands. He could tell immediately that this money had probably taken the family a long time to save. For them, it was a fortune. For him, it meant almost nothing. Jason sighed softly and shook his head. "Keep it." Martha froze. "My lord?" "I said keep it. You'll need the money more than I do." Martha immediately tried to insist, but Jason refused every time. After going back and forth for a while, she finally realized that this nobleman from the Far East truly had no intention of accepting payment. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Martha instinctively started lowering herself to her knees again. Jason quickly stopped her. "Please don't kneel again." At this point, he was starting to get a headache from it. Outside the house, word had already spread that Jason's strange medicine had actually worked. The townspeople who had been waiting near the entrance began coming back inside one after another, wanting to see Lillian with their own eyes. When they saw that the baby's condition had clearly improved, their expressions changed from curiosity to amazement. Then they learned something else. Jason hadn't charged Martha anything. Not a single silver stag. That surprised them even more. Until now, most people in the winter market town had viewed Jason with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and distance. Even Old Rhodes, who had already made money through dealing with Jason, had mostly treated him as a mysterious foreign nobleman whose background was impossible to understand. There had been respect for his status. But not necessarily respect for him as a person. Today changed that. For the first time, the townspeople genuinely admired him. In Westeros, the social divide between nobles and commoners was enormous. Most nobles stood far above ordinary people and barely considered the lives of peasants worth noticing. For someone of noble status to personally treat the sick daughter of a poor family was already unusual. For him to use what everyone believed was an extremely precious medicine and then refuse payment entirely. That was almost unheard of. The people living at the bottom of society might not be educated. Many couldn't read. Some barely understood anything beyond farming, hunting, cooking, or surviving the next winter. But they weren't stupid when it came to one thing. They knew who treated them well. And they remembered it. Lord East. Old Road stepped forward, rubbing his hands together excitedly. The smell of alcohol still clung heavily to his breath. "If you ever come to my tavern for a drink." He suddenly stopped. Hick. Then he remembered something. "Oh, right. You don't drink." Several people laughed. Old Rhodes waved his hand. Doesn't matter. If you come to eat, I'll only charge you half price. The crowd immediately burst into louder laughter. Half price? Someone called out. Old Rhodes, you stingy bastard. I thought you were about to say Lord East could eat for free. Old Rhodes rubbed his red nose and muttered defensively, if I feed everyone for free, my tavern won't stay open for very long. That only made everyone laugh harder. The dark, hopeless atmosphere that had filled the house earlier disappeared completely. Jason looked around at the smiling faces. Before he realized it, he was smiling too. There was something strangely refreshing about these people. Life here was harsh. The world was poor, dangerous, and backward. Yet the relationships between ordinary people often felt simpler than what Jason was used to in the modern world. After staying for a while longer, Jason checked on Lillian again. The baby was sleeping peacefully now. The unnatural redness in her face had faded into a healthier color, and her temperature seemed much closer to normal. Jason finally felt comfortable leaving. If anything changes, come get me immediately. I'm right next door. Martha nodded repeatedly. Yes, my lord. Thank you. Jason returned to his own house. Martha stood at the doorway and watched him leave before finally stepping back inside. The moment she returned, she noticed her eldest son, Michael, lying beside the bed. The 5-year-old boy was staring nervously at his sleeping little sister. Martha's heart tightened. She walked over and gently pulled him into her arms. Michael immediately hugged her back. His small body was still trembling slightly. Everything that had happened today had terrified him. Mother. He looked up. His dirty little face was streaked where tears had washed through the grime. Lillian is okay now, right? His large brown eyes finally held a little hope. I don't want her to die like father. His voice cracked. I want my sister. My Michael. Martha's eyes filled with tears again. She held his head against her chest and kissed his forehead. Don't worry, sweetheart. She stroked his hair. The Lord from the Far East saved her. Lillian isn't going to leave us. Michael tightened his arms around her. Nearby, the young girl watched them. She was Martha's younger sister, Lena. When she saw Martha and Michael crying together, tears began running down her own soot-stained cheeks. Sister. She gently placed a hand on Martha's shoulder. This is wonderful. Her voice trembled. I really thought poor Lillian was going to leave us too, just like Vic. She covered her mouth as another sob escaped. I'm so glad she's okay. Martha reached out and took her sister's hand. Thank you, Lena. She wiped the tears from her face. I'm lucky I still have you and Michael beside me. Then she looked toward the wall separating their home from Jason's. And all of this is thanks to Lord East. A grateful smile appeared on her face. He saved our little Lillian. Martha lowered her head slightly. May the old gods bless such a kind man. Then she seemed to remember something. Lena. Her younger sister looked at her. Yes. You should go next door. Lena blinked. To Lord East. Martha nodded. I can take care of Lillian now. Go see whether Lord East needs help with anything. She continued quietly. I've heard he came all the way from the Far East alone. He doesn't have servants or a maid with him. Living by himself must be inconvenient. Lena immediately remembered the promise she had made earlier. If Jason could save Lillian, she had sworn that she would serve him and his family for the rest of her life. And she had meant it. If Lord East was willing to accept her as a maid, she wouldn't regret it. For someone born into a poor family like hers, serving a noble household could actually be a very good future. Especially when that nobleman had already shown himself to be kind. Lena nodded. All right. I'll go ask. She stood and started toward the door. Wait. Martha stopped her. Lena turned around. Martha pointed at her face. Wash that off first. Lena instinctively touched the soot smeared across her cheeks. Then she looked at her sister in confusion. Martha continued, wash your face and put on clean clothes before you go. Lena hesitated. The soot wasn't there by accident. Martha had specifically told her to keep her face dirty whenever she was outside. It was protection. Since Vic, Martha's husband, had died from illness 2 years earlier, their household had been left with only women and children. And Lena was no longer the little girl she had been back then. Over the past 2 years, she had grown into a striking young woman. At 16, she was already considered old enough for marriage by northern standards. But their family circumstances had made everything complicated. A beautiful young woman without a father, husband, or older brother to protect her could easily attract the wrong kind of attention. And the winter market town wasn't exactly filled with gentle people. Farmers passed through regularly. So did mercenaries. Soldiers. Traveling merchants. Even knights who sometimes treated commoners as if they were little more than livestock. If the wrong man noticed Lena, their weak little family might not be able to protect her. So Martha had developed a simple solution. Hide her beauty. Lena wore coarse, patched clothing. She kept her hair plain. And whenever she went outside, she covered her face with soot and grime to make herself look like an ordinary kitchen girl. Fortunately, she usually worked in Winterfell's kitchens, helping with food preparation. So far, nobody important had paid much attention to her. That had kept her safe. Seeing Lena's confused expression, Martha walked over and began searching through their small collection of clothing. Lena, she said gently, I won't always be able to stay beside you. Her hands paused. And I'm not strong enough to protect you forever. Lena remained silent. Martha pulled out the cleanest clothes they owned and handed them to her. If Lord East is willing to take you into his household as a maid, that may be a better life for you. She looked seriously at her younger sister. It would certainly be better than spending the rest of your days working as a kitchen helper. Martha glanced toward the neighboring house again. And after what he did for Lillian today, I think he's the kind of lord you could safely serve. What do you think? Martha lowered her voice as she searched through their small collection of clothes. Lord East is truly a good man. Better than many of the nobles I've seen in Winterfell. I can feel it. She turned toward Lena. If you can serve a kind master like him, then maybe the old gods are finally watching over you. As she spoke, Martha pulled out a clean white dress made from coarse cloth. It was simple, but well cared for. I wore this when I got married. Lena carefully washed the soot and grime from her face. Once the dark stains disappeared, her real appearance was finally revealed. She was 16, with fair skin, soft black hair, large brown eyes, a small mouth, and delicate features. After washing, she removed her dirty work clothes and changed into the white dress Martha had given her. Martha looked at her younger sister and smiled warmly. You really are beautiful, Lena. Lena immediately became embarrassed. Do you really think Lord East would accept me as his maid? She lowered her eyes. What if he thinks I'm not good enough? Martha shook her head. With a face like yours, I doubt he'll dislike you. Then she thought for a moment. And if he refuses, remind him of the promise you made. Tell him you swore to serve him and his family if he saved Lillian. Martha smiled slightly. That way, maybe he won't be able to turn you away so easily. Lena's cheeks turned red. Can I really say something like that? Even as she asked, Jason's appearance came back to her mind. The foreign young man was tall, handsome, and completely different from the men she had grown up seeing in the north. But that wasn't what had left the strongest impression on her. It was the way he spoke. Calm. Gentle. The way he smiled without looking down on anyone. Most nobles she had seen carried themselves as though commoners barely existed. Jason didn't. The more Lena thought about him, the warmer her face became. Martha noticed and smiled knowingly. She stepped forward, hugged her younger sister, and kissed her forehead. Go. She gently pushed Lena toward the door. Be brave. Lord East is a good man. Even if you accidentally say something wrong, I don't think he'll punish you for it. Lena hugged Martha back. Then she leaned down and kissed little Michael on the cheek. I'll be back soon. She stepped outside. By now, most of the people who had gathered earlier had already gone home. The sky was beginning to darken. Lena carefully stepped around the puddles in the muddy road and walked the short distance to Jason's house. She stood in front of the door for a moment. Then she raised her hand and knocked softly. Inside, Jason was reorganizing the goods on the counter. He had spent most of the afternoon helping Lillian and had completely forgotten about opening the shop. When he heard the knock, his first thought was that something had happened to the baby. Jason immediately hurried downstairs and opened the door. He froze. A pretty young woman stood outside. For a second, Jason had no idea who she was. He looked at her in confusion. Hello. Can I help you? Lena blinked. Seeing the obvious confusion in his eyes, she quickly realized what had happened. Her cheeks turned slightly pink. Lord East. I'm Lena. Martha's younger sister. She lowered her voice. We met earlier. Martha's sister. Jason frowned. Had they? He thought back to the people inside the house. Then his eyes landed on Lena's large brown eyes. Suddenly, he remembered. The girl with the soot-covered face. Jason looked at her again. Without all the dirt and ash hiding her features, she looked completely different. Oh. He nodded. I remember now. You were standing beside Martha earlier. Then, without thinking, he added, you look really beautiful after cleaning up. The words slipped out naturally. Lena's entire face immediately turned red. She lowered her head and avoided his eyes. Jason froze. Right. This wasn't the modern world. In the conservative North, openly telling a young woman she was beautiful could easily sound far more intimate than he intended. Jason awkwardly cleared his throat. Only then did he realize he was still standing in the doorway. Sorry. Come inside. He stepped aside. Lena carefully entered. Jason casually said, Please sit, miss. Lena immediately looked alarmed. My lord, I'm not a lady. Jason blinked. For one confused second, he thought she had misunderstood the word. Then he remembered how titles worked in Westeros. Calling an unmarried woman, lady, or using a noble form of address was reserved for girls from noble houses. Sansa Stark could be called Lady Sansa. Arya Stark could be called Lady Arya. But a commoner like Lena would never dare accept such a title. Pretending to be nobility could cause serious trouble. Jason rubbed his nose awkwardly. Another cultural mistake. Right. Sorry. He quickly changed the subject. Lena, why did you come over? Did something happen to Lillian? No, my lord. Lena shook her head quickly. Lillian is much better. She's still sleeping. Jason visibly relaxed. That's good. Lena hesitated for a moment. Then she continued softly. My sister said that you live here alone and don't have any servants to take care of the house. She lowered her gaze. So she asked me to come and see if there's anything I can do for you. Jason immediately remembered what Lena had said earlier. She had promised to serve him and his family for the rest of her life if he managed to save Lillian. At the time, Jason had assumed it was just something she had said out of desperation. Apparently not. He couldn't help smiling helplessly. Lena, you really don't have to do that. She looked up. Jason continued. I helped Lillian because she was a sick child. I couldn't just stand there and watch her suffer. He tried to explain carefully. Where I come from, people care a lot about children's health. If someone sees a child in danger and they can help, most people will try. Lena listened quietly. So you don't owe me anything. Jason spread his hands. You don't need to repay me, and you definitely don't have to spend your whole life serving me because of it. Lena's expression slowly changed. Her eyes began to redden. Jason noticed immediately. Wait, that's not what I meant. But Lena suddenly lowered her head. My lord, please. Her voice trembled. Please let me serve you. Jason stared at her. Tears began gathering in Lena's eyes. She had completely forgotten Martha's advice to stay calm. My sister said you're a good person. Her voice became more emotional. If I can serve someone like you, then I would be lucky. Jason opened his mouth, but Lena continued before he could interrupt. Ever since my brother-in-law Vic died, my sister and I have lived with constant fear. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. There are only women and children in our family now. Her voice dropped. We don't have anyone strong enough to protect us. As Lena spoke, memories from the past 2 years seemed to come rushing back. Her tears began falling even harder. My sister always tells me to smear soot on my face and wear dirty clothes whenever I go outside. She wiped at her cheeks, but the tears wouldn't stop. She says that if the wrong kind of person notices me, there's no one in our family who can protect us. Her voice trembled. So please, my lord, don't send me away. Please let me stay by your side. Lena covered her face with both hands and started crying. Jason Liu immediately felt helpless. He had never been good at dealing with crying girls. And after spending several days in the winter market town, he knew Lena wasn't exaggerating. Westeros was a harsh place. For ordinary people, life was already difficult. For a young woman with no powerful family or protector, it could be even worse. Someone with Lena's appearance could easily attract unwanted attention. If she met the wrong person, she could be abused, kidnapped, or sold, and a poor family like hers would have almost no way to fight back. Jason scratched his head. He really couldn't bring himself to ignore that. All right. Lena slowly lowered her hands. Jason sighed. You can stay with me. Her tear-filled brown eyes widened. Really? Yes. A smile immediately began forming on her face. But, Jason added, I'm not taking you as a maid. Lena looked confused. Then. I'll hire you as an employee. Employee? Jason nodded. You can help me in the shop. Organize goods, deal with customers, help me sell things. That kind of work. Lena blinked several times. She didn't fully understand why Jason cared about the difference, but she understood one thing. He was allowing her to stay. That alone made her happy. Jason looked at her and continued. If you work for me, I'll provide your meals while you're working, and I'll pay you 10 silver stags every month. He paused. What do you think? Lena stared at him. Her mouth opened slightly. 10 silver stags. Jason suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Was that too little? 10 silver stags converted to only around 1,000 yuan by his rough calculations. Finding an employee that cheap in the modern world would be impossible. He almost felt like some terrible capitalist. Then Lena surprised him. My lord, that's far too much. Jason blinked. Too much. Lena nodded quickly. Yes. She looked genuinely shocked. When I helped in Winterfell's kitchens, I only earned 3 silver stags a month. And even that was already considered generous. 3. Jason stared at her. That was barely 10 copper stars a day. About the value of a few pounds of wheat. Jason silently thought about it. So compared to Winterfell, he was apparently an extremely generous employer. Of course, Jason didn't fully understand the economic situation of Westeros. Productivity was extremely low. There were far more people looking for basic work than there were jobs available. Because of that, labor was cheap. For a kitchen helper in the north, 3 silver stags per month really wasn't unusual. Still, Jason didn't change his offer. Ignoring Lena's attempts to refuse, he officially hired his first employee in Westeros. Monthly salary, 10 silver stags. Lena was delighted. Only minutes earlier, she had been crying. Now she wiped the last tears from her cheeks and immediately began looking around Jason's house for something to clean. Jason watched her start working and smiled. At least he had helped one person avoid what might have become a very difficult future. Since this was technically the first employee hired by his cross-world business, Jason decided they should celebrate. He went upstairs and searched through the modern food he had left in one corner. Bread. Instant noodles. Ham sausages. He carried everything downstairs. The moment Lena saw the packaged white bread, her eyes widened. She had never seen bread like this before. It was incredibly white. Soft. Fluffy. Nothing like the dark, coarse bread most commoners ate in the north. As for the instant noodle cups and packaged ham sausages, she had absolutely no idea what they were. Jason placed everything on the table. All right. Since today is your first day working for me, dinner is on me. Lena immediately shook her head. No, my lord. Jason looked at her. She stared at the food nervously. These things are too valuable. She pointed toward the white bread. Food like this isn't meant for someone like me. Her voice became quieter. You should eat it yourself. Don't worry about me. I can go home and eat with my sister and Michael. Jason paused. Then suddenly remembered something. Oh. He slapped his forehead lightly. Your sister probably hasn't eaten properly today either. Martha had spent the entire day worrying about Lillian. Michael probably hadn't eaten much either. Jason immediately went upstairs again. He grabbed 2 more cups of instant noodles and some extra food. Then he returned. Come on. Lena looked confused. Where? Your house. Jason picked everything up. Tonight, your boss is treating your whole family to dinner. Lena hurried after him. But, my lord. Jason gave her a serious look. This is your boss's first order. Lena immediately closed her mouth. Jason nodded in satisfaction. Good. He locked his door and walked next door with her. Lena followed beside him, both touched and nervous. When they entered Martha's house together, Martha immediately looked surprised. She had been sitting beside the bed where Lillian and Michael were resting. Seeing Jason, she quickly stood. My lord. She glanced nervously at Lena. I hope my sister didn't cause you any trouble. Whatever work you need done, just tell her. She'll listen. Jason placed the food on the dark wooden table. No trouble at all. He smiled. Actually, I came to tell you that I've hired Lena. Martha stared at him. Hired? Yes. She'll work in my shop and help sell the goods I bring from the Far East. Martha looked at Lena. This was very different from what she had expected. Lena immediately stepped closer to her sister, barely able to hide her excitement. Sister, Lord East said he'll pay me 10 silver stags every month. Martha froze. 10. Her expression immediately became alarmed. No, no, my lord. She hurriedly shook her head. You saved Lillian's life. How could we possibly take that much money from you? She looked toward Lena. Just letting her work for you and giving her food is already more than enough. You don't need to pay her anything. Jason shook his head. Martha, don't worry about it. He gestured toward Lena. I already agreed on the salary with her. But 10 silver stags really isn't much money to me. Jason smiled. Where I come from, that would actually be considered a very small salary. Martha still looked uncomfortable. Jason realized that if he kept letting her argue, they would be standing there all night. So he changed his tone slightly. That's the deal. Martha hesitated. Jason added, if you absolutely refuse, then I'll just have to hire someone else. Lena immediately looked nervous. Martha noticed. Finally, she stopped arguing. Then, thank you, my lord. Jason smiled. Good. He turned toward the table and started unpacking the instant noodles. And since Lena is officially my first employee in Westeros, tonight we're celebrating. Martha and Lena looked at him curiously. I'm treating everyone to food from my homeland. Jason tore open the lids of the instant noodle cups. Then he handed Lena a pot. Go boil some water. Lena had no idea why hot water was needed, but she immediately obeyed. Yes, my lord. She hurried into the small kitchen. Martha adjusted the blankets covering Michael and Lillian before following her sister. Once they were inside the kitchen, Martha leaned closer. So? Lena looked at her. Martha lowered her voice. How did you go there intending to become his maid and somehow come back as a paid employee? Lena's face immediately turned slightly red. The two sisters began whispering while preparing the boiling water. Meanwhile, Jason stayed at the table. He opened 4 cups of instant noodles. Then he unwrapped the ham sausages. 2 sausages went into each cup. Jason looked at the simple meal with satisfaction. For him, it was cheap convenience food. But for the family living in this small house in Westeros, dinner tonight was going to be unlike anything they had ever tasted before. After thinking about it for a moment, Jason worried that Martha, who had barely eaten all day, might still be hungry. So he added extra ham sausages to the other 3 cups. There was also a large bag of white bread on the table. That should definitely be enough. Jason himself only needed 1 cup of instant noodles. When the water finally boiled, he showed Lena what to do. Pour the hot water in up to here. Lena carefully followed his instructions. Now close the lid and wait a few minutes. She nodded seriously, as if Jason were teaching her some complicated secret recipe from the Far East. A short while later, the smell of instant noodles began spreading through the small room. Martha and Lena both lifted their heads. Their noses twitched slightly. The aroma was incredible. At least to them. Jason had eaten instant noodles far too many times in the modern world, so the smell didn't impress him at all. To Martha and Lena, however, it smelled like some kind of feast. Mother! Aunt Lena! A small voice suddenly came from the bed. 5-year-old Michael had been awakened by the smell. He slowly sat up and rubbed his eyes. When he noticed Jason sitting at the table, the little boy immediately became nervous and looked toward Martha. Martha walked over and gently helped him down from the bed. Michael, come here. She brought him closer. This is Lord Jason East. He's the one who saved your sister Lillian today. She gave her son an encouraging look. And now Lord East has kindly invited us to eat dinner with him. You should thank him properly. Michael hid slightly behind his mother. Thank you. Lord East. His voice was barely above a whisper. Jason smiled gently. Your name is Michael, right? The boy nodded. Come on, then. Try some food from my homeland. For a family that normally survived on coarse black bread and other simple meals, instant noodles packed with salt, oil, seasoning, and meat flavor were practically a luxury. Michael slowly stepped away from his mother. He looked up at Jason with wide, nervous eyes. "Thank you, Lord East." He twisted his fingers together. "Thank you for saving my sister Lillian." After speaking, he immediately lowered his head again. Jason smiled and lightly patted the boy's hair. "All right. I accept your thanks." Then he pointed toward the table. "Now go eat before the noodles get cold." Under Jason's insistence, Martha, Lena, and Michael finally sat at the same table with him. At first, all three were visibly uncomfortable. Commoners didn't normally sit and eat beside nobles. But Jason acted so casually that they slowly relaxed. Michael took his first bite. Ah! The noodles were too hot. He quickly pulled them away and stuck out his tongue. Jason laughed. "Slow down." Lena carefully tasted hers. Her eyes immediately widened. "This is delicious." She took another bite. Then another. "My lord, this is the best food I've ever eaten." Jason nearly laughed. Instant noodles. The best food she had ever eaten. That really said a lot about life in Westeros. Martha didn't say much because she was too busy eating. She had gone almost the entire day without food. Even though the noodles were still hot, she ate quickly. When Lena praised the meal, Martha nodded repeatedly. "Lord East, thank you." She looked genuinely grateful. Their family really had been lucky today. Not only had this young nobleman saved Lillian, he had hired Lena and was now feeding their entire family. When they tried the ham sausages, their reactions were even stronger. "Meat?" Lena stared at the sausage in surprise. Michael's face lit up. They couldn't even remember the last time they had eaten this much meat in one meal. Jason watched them and found himself enjoying the food more than usual. Maybe instant noodles really did taste better when the people eating with you treated them like a feast. Before Jason had even finished half of his own cup, Martha and Lena had already emptied theirs completely. They had even drunk all the broth. Michael wasn't far behind. Jason looked at the large bag of bread. "You can eat some bread too." He pushed it toward them. Martha glanced at the soft white bread. She swallowed instinctively. But after hesitating, she shook her head. "We're already full, my lord." She looked at the bread again. "It would be better to save it for tomorrow." Lena nodded as well. Jason didn't push them. Eating too much at once probably wasn't a great idea anyway, especially after they had been hungry for most of the day. By the time dinner ended, Jason felt noticeably closer to Martha's family. Before leaving, he checked on Lillian one last time. The baby was sleeping peacefully. Her breathing was steady, her face looked healthier, and her fever had gone down. Whatever was helping her, she seemed stable for now. Jason reminded Martha, "If anything changes tonight, come get me immediately. I'll be right next door." Martha nodded. "Yes, my lord." Jason said goodbye and returned to his own house. He walked upstairs. Then stopped. His room contained a bed. Technically, it was more like an empty wooden frame with bare boards. Jason stared at it and smiled helplessly. Right. I forgot about that. He activated his ability and returned to the modern world. A moment later, he was back inside his new villa. Jason grabbed the bedding he had purchased earlier, including the quilt, pillows, and sheets, then transported everything back to Westeros. Normally, he could have simply slept in the villa. But he was still worried about Lillian. If her condition suddenly worsened during the night, Martha needed to be able to reach him immediately. So Jason decided to stay. It would also be the first night he had ever spent in another world. After making the bed, he crouched down and pulled out the money box hidden beneath it. Inside were the remaining 907 silver stags. The 26 gold dragons had already been taken back to the modern world and sold for more than 290,000 yuan. At the moment, these silver coins were most of the Westerosi currency he still had on hand. Jason picked up a few of them. Eventually, he wanted to exchange most of his silver into gold dragons or raw gold. Gold was simply more useful. It had a much higher value for the amount of space and weight it occupied. That made it easier to transport between worlds. As for other valuable goods he could bring from Westeros into the modern world. Jason thought carefully. There weren't many obvious choices. Gold was still the best. Wood? That was possible. The north had enormous forests. The wolfswood alone stretched across a massive area outside Winterfell. Timber here was cheap compared to modern prices. But there were several problems. First, much of the land belonged to House Stark. Jason couldn't simply start cutting trees wherever he wanted. Doing that without permission might end with him sitting in a Winterfell dungeon. Second, even if he negotiated with House Stark and legally bought timber, he didn't have enough people. He currently had exactly one employee in Westeros. Lena. And in the modern world, Jason was still working alone. Transporting, storing, processing, and selling large amounts of timber would be far too troublesome right now. It could become a good business later. Just not yet. At this stage, Jason needed something with the opposite characteristics. Small volume. High value. Easy to carry. Easy to sell. He needed to accumulate capital as quickly as possible. Once he had enough money, he could begin his real plan. Flood Westeros with modern products. Cheap clothing. Soap and cleaning products. Plastic goods. Basic tools. Household items. Countless everyday products that were extremely cheap in the modern world could become valuable commodities here. But there was no way Jason could handle that scale alone. He needed warehouses. Employees. Transportation. Distribution networks. Merchants. And a lot more starting capital. So for now, the easiest strategy was obvious. Convert as much Westerosi wealth as possible into gold. And when it came to gold, one place immediately stood above the rest. The Westerlands. There was an old joke throughout Westeros that the Western lands contained so much gold that even the toilets of House Lannister must be made from it. Some versions of the joke went even further and claimed that even the Lannisters' waste came out golden. Crude, but the point was obvious. The Westerlands were incredibly wealthy. Their gold mines had supported House Lannister's power for generations. That wealth was also why Tywin Lannister could lend enormous sums to the Iron Throne without hesitation. Jason's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. If he could establish regular trade with merchants from the Westerlands, then obtaining gold might become much easier. That thought immediately reminded him of someone. Odover. The merchant from the Westerlands. Jason wondered how things were going for him. More specifically, he wondered how well the gel pens and A4 paper Odover had purchased were selling back home. If demand was strong, then maybe Odover could become Jason's first real connection to the wealth of the Westerlands. If Odover's business in the Westerlands was going well, Jason Liu could use him to meet more Western merchants. Better yet, he could ask them to pay in gold. Jason wouldn't even mind giving them a slight discount if they agreed to bring gold dragons or raw gold for their purchases. The more he thought about it, the better the idea sounded. Odover would probably be happy with that arrangement too. Jason sat on the edge of the bed for a while, thinking through his plans. Then another knock came from downstairs. He immediately stood up. Could something have happened to Lillian? Jason hurried downstairs and opened the door. Lena was standing outside, carrying a basin of steaming hot water. Jason frowned. What happened? Is Lillian all right? No, my lord. Nothing happened. Lena quickly shook her head. The steam from the basin had turned her cheeks slightly pink. I brought some hot water for you to wash up before sleeping. Jason relaxed. Oh. Then he quickly reached for the basin. You don't need to do that. I can take care of myself. Lena tried to insist that helping him was part of her responsibility now, but Jason refused. Having someone personally wash his feet felt far too strange to him. The only person who had ever done something like that was his mother when he was a little kid. He had never even gone to one of those foot massage or sauna places back home. In the end, Lena had no choice but to hand over the basin. She followed him upstairs. The moment she entered the bedroom, she noticed that Jason's new bedding still hadn't been properly arranged. Her eyes immediately lit up. Finally, something she could help with. Before Jason could stop her, Lena walked over and began making the bed. Jason opened his mouth. Then closed it again. She had already started. Fine. He sat nearby and washed his feet while Lena spread the sheets and arranged the quilt. Her fingers constantly moved over the fabric. My lord, this cloth is incredible. She looked amazed. It's so tightly woven. She pressed her hand against the quilt. And it's so soft. The colors are so bright too. To Lena, even ordinary modern bedding looked incredibly luxurious. Jason barely thought about it. I'll get you a set sometime. Lena immediately turned around. For me? Sure. Jason shrugged. This kind of thing is pretty ordinary where I come from. Lena looked at the soft quilt with obvious longing. But then she quickly shook her head. No, my lord. It would be too valuable. Jason didn't argue. He could always give it to her later. After he finished washing up, Jason stretched. There wasn't exactly much entertainment available in Westeros at night. No television. No internet. No phone signal. Not even proper electric lighting. Once darkness came, there was little to do besides sit under a dim oil lamp or go to sleep. Jason glanced at Lena. She was still standing beside the bed. Lena, it's late. You should get some sleep. Lena stiffened slightly. She stayed where she was. Jason waited. Nothing happened. He frowned. Maybe she hadn't understood that he meant she should go home. Lena, you can head back now. I'm going to sleep. She hesitated. My lord. Yes. She looked uncomfortable. You're really going to stay here by yourself? Jason stared at her. Of course. He pointed toward his new bedding. I just bought this quilt. It's warm enough. Lena seemed unsure what to say. Jason misunderstood her concern completely. It's summer anyway. The north is cooler than where I'm from, but I'm not going to freeze. He patted his chest confidently. Don't worry. I'm perfectly healthy. Lena stood there in silence. Her face had become even redder. Jason still had absolutely no idea why. He simply assumed she was embarrassed because she had worried unnecessarily. After another awkward moment, he walked her downstairs. Good night, Lena. Good night, my lord. Jason closed the door. Lena remained outside for several seconds. Her thoughts were completely tangled. Whatever she had expected from the evening, the conversation had gone in an entirely different direction. Eventually, she slowly walked home. When Martha saw Lena return alone, she studied her younger sister's expression. She seemed disappointed for a moment but decided not to ask too many questions. Whatever thoughts Martha had entertained earlier, Lord East had clearly maintained a respectful distance. Perhaps that was for the best. A nobleman like Jason East would probably marry someone from an important family someday. For now, Lena already had something far more valuable than a fantasy. A safe job. A generous salary. And the protection of someone who treated her well. After everyone washed up, Martha's family settled down for the night. Lena lay awake for a while. She felt slightly embarrassed about the misunderstanding, but eventually she smiled to herself. Lord East really was different from the nobles she had known. Meanwhile, Jason's first night in Westeros was far less dramatic. He had expected the unfamiliar environment to keep him awake. Instead, after everything that had happened during the day, exhaustion hit him almost immediately. He slept deeply. The next morning, another knock woke him. Jason opened his eyes and stared at the unfamiliar wooden ceiling for a moment. Then he remembered where he was. Westeros. He got out of bed. Lena had come to call him for breakfast. After washing his face and brushing his teeth with the supplies he had brought from the modern world, Jason went next door. Breakfast was already waiting. There were fried eggs, some of yesterday's white bread, and a thick soup made with carrots and onions. Simple, but filling. Jason had also handed over most of the instant noodles, ham sausages, and bread he had stored in the house to Lena. From now on, she could handle preparing meals. Jason sat at the table and thought about his 10 silver stag monthly salary again. He had hired someone who could help in the shop, prepare meals, clean the house, and handle basic everyday work. 10 silver stags a month. Jason almost felt guilty. Almost. Because sitting down and having breakfast waiting for him was incredibly convenient. So this is how people get spoiled by having servants. Jason shook his head. He had criticized feudal society plenty in his mind. Yet after barely one day of having someone help with cleaning and cooking, he was already enjoying it. After breakfast, Jason went to check on Lillian. The baby was awake. Lena had told him that Lillian was around 1 year old. Jason checked her temperature. Normal. The fever had disappeared. Even better, the little girl was no longer crying. She simply lay there and stared curiously at Jason with wide eyes. Jason smiled and lightly touched her thin cheek. "You look much better today." He made sure her condition remained stable and that there were no obvious signs of the fever returning. From what he could see, the immediate danger had passed. If things continued this way, Lillian should recover with rest and proper care. Martha looked as if an enormous weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Jason gave her a few simple instructions. Keep watching her closely. If the fever comes back or anything seems wrong, come get me immediately. Yes, my lord. Jason nodded. Satisfied that Lillian was doing well, he left Martha's house and returned to his shop next door. There was still plenty of work waiting for him.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.